After she met death, she returned to the day the Duke's daughter was taken to the orphanage. The teachers introduced a girl with big blue eyes and white hair, who from today on will spend time with the others. The girl shyly introduced herself as Dana. She hoped that she and the guys would get along. When Leah saw her, something inside her tensed and a blush appeared on her face. Those blue eyes that sparkle so much and that hair that glows silver, it is unmistakably Diana, the youngest daughter of the Duchy of Hellas. Leah wondered if she was dreaming. After her death in the Duchy of Hellas, the girl returned to her starting point. Leah stood opposite Dana and wondered if this was some kind of prank of fate. It all happened spontaneously. Just one day ago, at the headquarters of the Delencium Information Guild, a girl walked into the master's office to take on a mission. Leah asked if the master had forgotten his promise to give her a task. The man laughed awkwardly, as if he was surprised that this day had already arrived, which made the girl childishly indignant. Among the first-rank agents, she was the only one who hadn't received a normal mission. Even though it had been more than a week, there had to be a limit to ignoring her skills. The master looked at Leah with red eyes and chuckled thoughtfully. The man told the agent that he hadn't forgotten about the mission, and that this time it would be a big deal. He raised his hand, adding that due to his schedule he would not be there tomorrow. The master asked if the agent would be able to complete the mission he had given to Jade before he returned. Leah was full of confidence and asked to be given this. The girl jumped up, not believing that the master had given her a mission to secretly infiltrate the Duchy of Hellas, and the boy with a mug of beer calmly asked if there was any reason not to believe it. He believed that with Leah's abilities, she could be trusted with this mission. Everyone knew that she had outstanding skills. They just didn't admit it because they envied the master's passion for her. The boy began listing the missions that the master had previously given her, finding a local resident's scarf, taking a lost child home. The girl leaned towards the agent, shouting at him, "What kind of passion do you have if you only get missions like this?" The guy suddenly asked if Leah hadn't said that she knew someone in the duchy. She spilled the beans on the day she drank alcohol for the first time in honor of her coming of age. Then Leah told about her childhood in the orphanage. The agent laughed awkwardly, justifying herself by saying that when drunk you can say all sorts of things, and it couldn't be that she had connections with prominent aristocrats. The girl quickly changed the subject to the fact that it was time to go to bed, since tomorrow she had to go on a mission. She headed towards the exit and waved her hand to Jade. The boy stood up from such a quickly changed mood, wanting to stop the girl. But she left, clearly feeling awkward about the awkward incident that had arisen in the conversation. A smirk appeared on Jade's lips. Duke Helid is a man who is called the Sword of the Ragstein Empire. As Jade mentioned, Leah has a connection to the Duchy of Hellas that cannot be erased. 10 years had already passed, but the memories swam before my eyes. That razor-sharp gaze and the decision made without a drop of mercy. Of course, those little girls' emotions had no effect on the completion of today's mission. The master gave the task to find out in detail who was visiting the target's mansion and what they were talking about there. The agent expected an influential person to arrive, but what was happening was truly suspicious. On one side, the entire knightly order of the duchy has gathered, but it is so quiet that you wouldn't think a guest is arriving. The girl was drawn to find out what secret conversation they were going to have. Suddenly, a carriage pulled by 4 elegant horses drove through the gate. The coachman sat on the red velvet box in a suit that complemented his top hat. The Duke greeted the guest and said that he had been waiting for him. It is surprising that it was not a servant, but the Duke of Hellas himself who personally came to the meeting. Leah jumped down from the tree like a cat to follow them, as the guest was clearly unusual. The tip of the blade glinted in the cold moonlight at his throat. A male voice asked the girl who she was. The Duke's eldest son warned her that if she did not reveal her identity, he would kill her. Leah recognized the voice, turned around and soon realized that it was Lucio Helid in front of her. Right now, at this very moment, she didn't want to run into him. But the information Jade conveyed clearly stated that Lucio would not be at the duchy mansion today. The girl decided that this bastard had deliberately given false information. The guy repeated that the girl should surrender and name the one who gave her the order, and then he would spare her life. But instead of an answer, the tip of the dagger flashed in front of his face. The girl swung at Lucio, but he held out his sword and blocked the blow. The young man took this action as an answer. Now he would definitely not show mercy. The sword's thick blade, compared to the dagger, rose sharply, and the concealing mask fell from Leah's face. The guy's eyes widened and he was stunned for a split second, asking why her. The agent covered her face with her hand. Leah couldn't believe he recognized her. No, he simply couldn't remember the girl with the most ordinary light brown hair after 10 years had passed. Leah gritted her teeth. She didn't want to show herself in that light, even to Lucio. She turned to run away. The young man extended his hand to her, begging her to stop. A hand in white gloves barely touched her long hair. He told her not to run away, and after these words, a sharp, piercing pain was felt in the area of the heart. His blue eyes seemed to speak of shock. The young man's hand froze. He didn't want this. Leah fell to the ground, and Lucio took a quick step forward to catch her. The guards heard the noise and rushed towards them, shouting that the offender had been caught. Their goal was to arrest him. The girl coughed up blood. Her breathing became ragged, and even at that moment she reproached herself for losing her vigilance. Lucio held her shoulders tightly and called her name excitedly. Leah didn't think that this fantasy where he calls her name would come true at the last moment of her life. The young man did not notice anything around him. He held her in his arms, asking the girl to come to her senses. The agent's hand went weak, her finger trembled, and after that her whole body went soft. The last thought that visited her was whether she had ever said her name. Lucio, holding her in his arms, shouted the girl's name again, but in vain. A male voice asked if Leah really thought that other people would accept her if she behaved this way. He touched her forehead with his black-gloved index finger, saying that there was no way he could be a good person for her, so no matter what anyone said, let them not be mistaken. Leah must remember only one thing: never trust him. Hearing these words, she woke up screaming. The girl sat up, not understanding what was happening, whether she was really alive. Her heart was definitely pierced, but she didn't feel any pain. Then Leah looked at her hands. They were like a child's. A wave of heat washed over my entire body. The girl looked around. She was in a painfully familiar place where everything was as before. An old bed and torn curtains, and that familiar look of the orphanage she had seen when she was little. She picked up the mirror and thought that if her appearance in the reflection was not a deception, then she had returned to the past. A loud voice pulled her out of her thoughts. The girls were sitting at a wooden table having lunch. The red-haired girl said that Leah was completely lost in thought while she was eating. Emily asked Leah if she wanted some bread, and the girl replied that she wasn't very hungry today, so she offered her portion, which made Emily beam. She was very grateful to Leah, who smiled kindly, even though she still clearly remembered the blood pouring out of her. Leah has returned to the past as if she were dreaming, and now she spends the day as if nothing happened. The greenhouse came up to her and put his hand palm up, as if he was demanding that she give him the food if she was not going to eat. Leah remembered that idiot Thomas, who pretended to be the boss of the shelter, thinking that just being big was enough to do it. The girl told Thomas not to make her laugh. Why would he even eat her bread? The guy was almost taken aback by such impudence. He indignantly asked what kind of answer that was, but someone intervened in their conversation. A calm, soft voice told Thomas in a confident tone to be quiet. He asked if the boy really wanted to be punished by the principal. Thomas was surprised. He didn't understand why Jack was interfering, to which the guy said that Thomas was the first to start bothering the children. The boy shouted out what had come over those who usually didn't even squeak, and he quickly glanced at the piece of bread. He snatched it from the plate before Emily could make a sound. Thomas ran, shouting that he should have kept his eyes open. Now he would eat him. Leah jumped up from her chair and shouted at Thomas to stay put. Emily grabbed the girl by the sleeve, stopping her. She asked Leah in surprise if she was really going to chase Thomas. Looking around, the girl noticed how others were looking at her with bewilderment, why Leah was acting like this, how she could not be afraid of Thomas, and if she was beaten, the atmosphere around her would thicken. And then the heroine remembered that in the orphanage, she was a timid and weak girl. There is nothing good if a person changes abruptly overnight, so Leah decided to start behaving calmly. She agreed with Emily. Jack watched silently as the girl promised to be careful and thanked Emily for her concern. The boy's brows furrowed, but he said nothing. After some time, Leah's stomach began to hurt so much that she grabbed it. He growled loudly, making it clear that he was hungry. The girl had no strength left due to the lack of food, so she even reproached herself for not running after this Thomas. The guy called her a fool briefly and to the point. Jack crossed his arms over his chest and asked, as if it were an interrogation, why Leah had so idiotic a thing or two about giving him the bread. He believed that Leah was to blame, and the girl began to get angry, even thought about hitting Jack once, but he took out a piece of bread and handed it to her. Leah held the piece of food in both palms as if it were something fragile. She asked if he was really giving the bread to her, and Jack sighed. He said that she could throw it away if she didn't want to eat it. The girl hugged the food to herself. Jack's gesture pleasantly surprised her, because in those days at the orphanage they hardly spoke, and now she was grateful to him in a new way. Leah smiled and asked if that meant Jack was a good boy. A blush appeared under the boy's eye, and he mumbled that she really was strange today. Suddenly, shouts were heard. The director was telling everyone to urgently go down to the main entrance, since a new pupil had arrived at the orphanage. And so, at the present time, the girl was standing in front of Dana. She involuntarily clutched the fabric of her apron, wondering if it could be an accident. The atmosphere was extremely negative. The children looked at the new girl with disdain. Because now there is one more mouth to feed, and they already don't have enough food. If Diana had not appeared in this place in the past, the Duke would not have razed this shelter to pieces, and Leah would not have suddenly become a vagabond, and would not have been subjected to various difficulties. Unclenching her hand, Leah walked up to the girl and leaned over, asking Dana in a friendly manner how old she was. Leah understood that if she continued to blame Diana for everything that had happened, nothing would change. You can't put off responsibility for an innocent child, so she decided to take the first step, and the girl happily replied that she was 4 years old. Leah carefully took her small pale hand and said that Dana was already so big that she remembered her age. Those trusting big eyes, with their characteristic childish confidence, rejoiced in the friendliness and warmth. First, Leah decided to wash Dana, and the little girl happily ran up to her. It seems that this is his and Diana's chance to change the future. Leah helped Dana take off her dress, and the girl laughed, raising her hands up. Leah took the towel and carefully wrung it out over a wooden bucket. She touched the girl's face and began to rub it, asked if Dana was cold, and she said no. In her past life, Diana was spoiled and would cry at the slightest thing, so the children, afraid of being punished by the principal, avoided her. Leah also tried to keep her distance, like other children, so as not to get into unnecessary trouble. But, oddly enough, Diana revolved around her. Wherever Leah went, there was this blue-eyed child. At the time, it was a burdensome attention, but thinking about it now, it seems like Leah was being too cruel to a 4-year-old child separated from his family. While tremblingly washing the girl's hair, Leah raised her head and gasped, looking at her. The heroine had no idea before washing her that Dana had dazzling silver hair and blue eyes. No matter how you look at it, she was a member of the Helid family. The director, who says every day that children are stupid, is actually stupid himself. He thinks that the child of an aristocrat is an orphan. Leah decided to distract herself from her thoughts and announced that they would now wash Dana's feet. She suddenly froze when she saw that the tiny girl's legs were covered in wounds. The child shook his head and quickly waved his arms. Dana assured him that it was nothing like that. Leah said that she was not angry, and the girl could tell her honestly. Then Dana asked if Leah really would not scream. Then the little girl admitted that she was actually in pain. Leah knew it. Dana was afraid that she would be scolded, so the girl asked her not to worry because she would make her legs stop hurting. Carefully holding the little foot, Leah placed her palm on the girl's foot and concentrated. A bright blue light flashed between the children, particles of it floating in the air around them. Dana's legs sparkled as if there were no wounds or abrasions on them. The girl called her sister Leah cool, simply amazing, when she saw that not only the wounds on her legs had disappeared, but the pain had also disappeared. Leah learned all sorts of magic from the master, even though she has little innate mana and can barely use magic once. The girl ran out of mana just from using healing magic, but a miracle happened. There should have been only a small amount of mana left, but Leah felt overwhelmed by it. While she was thinking that something had gone wrong, Diana jumped from her seat and hugged her around the neck. This child was incredibly grateful to her sister. Dana said that thanks to her she was very happy. Leah froze, a blush appearing on her cheeks as the warmth and scent of the baby calmed her jumbled feelings over yesterday's shocking event. She touched the girl's hair, replying that she was also happy to have met Dana. Leah sat down on the floor, hugging the child back carefully. There were many dubious moments, but now the heroine decided to focus on something else. In a week, the Duke of Hellas was supposed to arrive with his knights. At that time, the director hid Diana to sell her to a slave trader, but the knightly order that was looking for the Duke's daughter caught the director in a lie, and because of this, the entire orphanage was accused of complicity and punished personally by the angry Duke. But if you take care of Dana for the rest of the week, you can find evidence of the director's crimes to pass on to the Duke. In this case, the future will definitely change for the better. That night, Leah and Dana were lying in the same bed. The girl asked her sister to read her a story, but there were no books here. Leah asked the child if she could tell him an old story. However, the girl was interested in something else. She touched her finger to the red stone that hung around Leah's neck and asked what it was. The girl said that she has been wearing it since she was abandoned in front of the orphanage, and she feels like she can't walk without it. Suddenly, Leah noticed that the stone had cracked. She was very surprised and even upset, because she saw it only now. She had kept it carefully because it could help her meet her parents, but now it had cracked, and tears themselves appeared on Leah's eyelashes. Dana touched her sister's hand and called the stone beautiful even with the crack, just like Sister Leah herself. The girl stared at the child. It was the first time she had heard such a compliment. Dana took Leah by the hand and said that she was very beautiful. She was practically glowing. The heroine thanked the little girl for this compliment and admitted that she was the first one to tell her about it. In fact, Leah considered herself very beautiful as a child. So much so that she was surprised when she looked in the mirror, which reflected the clear gaze of soft pink eyes, the same pastel-colored long hair and delicate facial features. But no one told her about her beauty. On the contrary, they even thought that she had inflated self-esteem, but the girl did not understand why no one had ever told her about her beauty. Leah thought everyone was jealous of her and told herself not to pay attention. Before she heard those words, when a girl named Lizzie told her that Anne had a beautiful hair color, she wanted the same for herself. Then Leah asked Lizzie if she liked her hair. Wasn't it special and beautiful? The girl looked at Leah and replied that her hair had good structure. But it's just light brown hair. Leah was horrified. She took a step forward and the wooden bucket of water overturned. Everything around became dim. These words sounded like a blow. The girl looked at her reflection in the water and did not understand what it meant, how her hair color could be light brown if she saw herself differently. It turns out that the way she saw herself was different from how those around her saw her. They described her hair as chestnut and her eyes as brown, dark brown. Everyone was saying the same thing, and then the girl decided that there really was something wrong with her eyes. But she still couldn't come to terms with it, so she asked artists to paint her portrait, and then even asked the master. Leah smiled because all this was in the past. But now she had more important things to do, and with that understanding, she and Dana hugged tightly under the warm blanket. The little girl told her sister that she had eaten everything, and Leah, who had just picked up the bread, praised the girl. Suddenly, Dana's stomach growled. She was still hungry. Then Leah decided to give the girl her bread, because she is small, and it is natural that she has a good appetite. The heroine was a little out of sorts, but she considered herself an adult who could handle it. After some time, she felt the consequences of her malnutrition. Stomach pain began to torment her again. Leah was going to do the laundry and bring water, but she didn't think that her physical strength was so weak due to the lack of energy, she couldn't even really feel the manna in her body. The girl was already thinking that if the waterfall in the shelter was at least a little better, she wouldn't suffer so much, when suddenly Dana turned around and pointed out to her sister that the water was already visible there. The river was so clear that you could see the rocks sticking out from above completely. The water flowed along its own current, and the sun's glare was reflected in it. When the children reached the shore, Leah sat down on the grass with relief, rejoicing in her small victory. Leah asked the little girl if she would sit quietly while she did the laundry, and the little girl promised. The heroine looked at her skirt and saw that it was dirty again. Leah was going to quickly wash it and go downstairs. Somewhere nearby, a strange sound was heard, as if something was whistling, cutting through the wind. Leah turned around, trying to figure out what it was. The wooden sword was swung in different directions, producing a characteristic whistle. Besides him, the closer the girls got to the source of the sound, the louder the ragged breathing and deep exhalations could be heard. This was Jack training. Leah had no idea that this boy had been training in such places since childhood, but now she was watching him from behind the trees. Although Jack never really learned it, he was honest and without bad habits. Leah looked down at Dana, who was staring at Jack. In the future, this boy will be called one of the 3 great knights of the Empire, and he will become a master of the sword, and of course his destiny is to become Diana's faithful knight. The boy stopped and exhaled loudly, wiping the sweat from his forehead. Then Leah grabbed Dana and abruptly hid behind a tree. The girl was sure that her abilities were perfect for stealth, so they would definitely not be noticed, but Jack clearly would not agree with her. He turned to the tree she was standing behind and told her to just come out since he could see where she was standing. Leah peeked out from behind the tree and asked with a smile if he knew she was there, and it turned out that Jack had known all along. The girl said that if she had known that he knew anyway, she would have immediately gone out to say hello, when suddenly her stomach rumbled and the boy sighed. He asked why she had given everything she had to this little girl today. He looked at Dana and added that she was small, but she ate like crazy. It was quite offensive for a small child to hear these words. The girl's eyebrows arched, her lips pursed, and her eyes became glassy. Leah stood up for Dana, saying that children should eat a lot. The little girl stuck her tongue out at Jack, and he did the same, although he should have been a little polite to the lady to whom he would swear allegiance in the future. Jack told Leah to stop talking nonsense and threw a piece of bread into her hands. The heroine wondered if it was Jack's spare bread, but he told her to just eat, and if she didn't want to receive it all the time, she should get food herself. The boy turned to the little girl and sternly told her not to even think about trying to do this. Leah asked if Jack was training alone and if he wanted to become a knight in the future, but the boy didn't think that ordinary people like them could achieve this so easily. He was going to become a mercenary to earn money. The girl smiled at this turn of events because Jack would dream of becoming a knight in the future, and as a child he dreamed of being a mercenary, and yet she shared that she thought Jack would still become a knight, and the boy's hand trembled. He indignantly asked what she knew anyway, since it was so complicated, and Leah tried to wriggle out of it. She understood that it was difficult, but if she tried, she could achieve her goal, because Jack also wanted to become a knight. The girl said with a sincere smile that Jack would definitely succeed if he worked hard. Leah's behavior and unexpected words of support left the boy confused. On the way back, he helped her carry the buckets she had brought there for washing. Leah smiled as she walked behind him, because Jack pretended not to care, but in the end he still courted her, which led to one thought: he was worried about Dana. If this were not the case, he would not have stood up and defended Dana at a time when no one else dared. Knighthood is not only a title but also a protection of the weak. Leah stopped abruptly because she had been walking a lot, her leg had cramped. And then Dana told her sister that it was hard for her. She asked if Leah could carry her. The girl didn't refuse. She only asked to wait a little, but Jack noticed the position of Leah's leg. He turned to the little girl and asked if she wanted to kill Leah. The girl smiled tensely because the two began to argue again. Jack squatted down and asked Leah with a pretentious expression why she was standing up, let her take Dana, and he would take her in his arms. The girl began to wave it off, saying that no matter how strong Jack was, he couldn't carry the two of them. But when the boy lifted both girls without any problems, Leah began to doubt. They didn't meet any of the kids along the way, and when the boy let the girls go to the ground, Leah thanked him. She asked if it was hard, but Jack suddenly turned around, thereby hiding his embarrassment, and replied that it was nothing serious. The girl smiled, looking after him. Even though he said so, he was actually a good guy. Leah extended her arms to Dana, beckoning him inside, but the ordeal did not end there. The director approached the girls and looked at them sternly, then rudely asked where they were hanging out at such a time. Dana immediately rushed to Leah with tears in her eyes. She said that this guy was scary. He was all black and she didn't like him. Getting caught by the principal after they were late past curfew was just terrifying, but Leah had the good sense to reply that they were just coming back from doing laundry. The man asked how old the girl was, and Leah replied that she was 8, although she didn't quite understand why he needed that. A smirk appeared under the director's dark mustache and he chuckled thoughtfully. Suddenly his mood changed and he told the girls to quickly go back inside, as he would not give them a second chance. Even now Leah understood what a hypocrite he was. All he did was get drunk and pretend to be an adult. The girl even made a face at him. Dana peeked out timidly from behind Leah's dress and asked her little sister if the scary guy had left. The heroine stroked the baby's head and said that he was already so far away that there was nothing to be afraid of anymore. One day there came a day when Duke Hellas arrived at the shelter. He found Dana and Jack locked in the attic, tied up and beaten. And then, with one blow, he executed the director and punished the orphanage for conspiracy. And that day was already near. Leah knew that if she wanted to protect Diana and the children at the orphanage, she needed evidence to get rid of the director. My lord was informed that the slums and the orphanage within the estate had been combed, but the lady was nowhere to be found. The Duke turned around and ordered the search area to be expanded. With lines of fatigue visible under his eyes, the man gave the order to inspect all ships arriving in the neighboring kingdoms. A few days ago, Diana went missing during a festival. Then, everyone thought that she was simply lost and would soon be found. The Duke wondered if his old friend felt the same way. He hadn't eaten or drunk for several days, as if he were about to go on strike, but Taze replied that he simply had to find my lady. Helid remarked to the boy that he was of little use in such a state. The boy lowered his head and promised to improve, and at that moment his friend glanced at him. A smile of a man who has something in mind spread across his face. His only goal was to destroy Tezu's life by spreading false information that he had been removed from the lady's guard. But the situation turned out to be much more serious, but it was even better this way, because now Taze had lost the Duke's trust. The Duke announced that he, Taze, and Sid would head to the wide western sector and would begin the pursuit in the east. Helad also ordered that Count Marietta be told to join them in the west. That night, Dana slept soundly in her bed, but without her sister. Leah quietly walked out into the corridor and approached the director's door. She was fiddling with the keyhole with a long bobby pin when suddenly there was a click. She managed to open the door. Quietly entering inside, the girl exhaled to herself. She hadn't carried out covert operations for a long time, and now it had become much more difficult to do so due to her childish, weak constitution. Leah walked over to the desk and began sorting through the papers. The entire journal was filled with incredible expenses on food, water, books, toys, theft of funds, but this is clearly not the director's only secret. The girl closed her eyes and told herself to focus. She concentrated to use the mana clot and find something suspicious. She found it. A bright blue light pointed her to the carpet. The girl leaned over to him and quickly lifted him from the floor. This carpet was not simple. It was an artifact with a cloaking spell cast on it, and there was a door hidden underneath it. The girl opened it, wondering why there was such an expensive thing in the old orphanage. Under the wooden door stood a huge chest which was locked. Leah stopped and looked at him with some thought. This was it. Using her magical abilities, she managed to open the door of the chest, inside which were notebooks, lists, and magazines. Their number was several times greater than what was lying on the table. What was the director hiding that he had to hide so carefully? The books contained information about children who had once lived in the orphanage, but there were also names written in the notes column that Leah had seen somewhere before. Suddenly, a shock of realization pierced her body. She remembered. These names belonged to criminals who shocked the empire with their slave sales. Leah encountered them when she worked as an information agent for Delencium. The girl didn't have enough anger towards this scoundrel, who collaborated with the kidnappers and sold children on the black market. Leah sat down on the floor after trying to calm herself down. First, she was going to make a copy of the ledger and the list of transactions so that she could give the original to the Duke as evidence and leave the copy where she was. The girl thought that it would not be for long, but she would have enough time until the Duke arrived. Suddenly, a sharp feeling pierced her chest, like a lightning strike, and blood began to drip onto the white apron and the floor. She stained Leah's mouth and hands, and the girl only noticed it when she felt the viscous liquid flowing down her fingers. The girl coughed. Blood rushed to her throat. A sharp release of mana brought her body to the limit. But she couldn't fall now, and the first thing she did was to remove traces of blood from the floor. Leah's goal is to cover up the crime and not reveal herself before the Duke arrives. It's important that the director doesn't notice that someone has entered his office. Several days had passed since that night. The sun was warm outside, and the orphanage's children chatted among themselves while cleaning. At this time, Leah was washing the windows, lost in thought about something. A girl named Annie called out to her, and the heroine asked if she had slept well. Annie answered positively, but she asked Leah the same thing, because she had been looking sick lately. Leah made an excuse that she was feeling slightly unwell, although after the night when she broke into the director's office, she developed a fever, but now the girl has recovered enough and can use simple magic if necessary. She smiled softly and thanked Annie for her concern. Suddenly, the director's furious cry was heard, saying that they, like parasites, had become lazy again. The man told them to immediately stop chatting and immediately start cleaning. He stood in front of the two girls and waved his index finger, indicating what they should do. Annie immediately ran away, asking for forgiveness. Leah looked at the director with her stern gaze, as stern as a child could be, and the man cursed. His head was already splitting. Then the girl had a thought, could this really be connected with the Duke of Hellas? Has he finally come to pick up his daughter Dana? The director waved his hand sharply and shouted loudly at the girl, his index finger almost touching her forehead. He asked to bring the new girl here quickly, and Leah had to run across the orphanage yard to find Diana. Leah didn't know what to do. She could run away right now, but that wouldn't work. Then she would miss the Duke. And if they take Dana, then, as in the past, they will hide her in the attic to hide her from the Duke of Hellas. Eventually she will still be found, but after that the angry Duke will punish the children from the orphanage. Leah had to avoid this at all costs, and just as she was thinking about this, she noticed Dana in the hallway. The little girl was upset. She was holding her white apron in her hands. It was all covered in dirt. Leah ran up to her and asked what had happened. It turned out that the little girl had fallen very painfully. The girl felt guilty and apologized because her sister tried so hard to clean her clothes. Leah touched the baby's face and asked her not to cry because everything was fine. The girl hugged Dana and said that it wasn't her fault. It could have happened to anyone. Besides, you can do the laundry again. Loud footsteps and shouts were heard, asking why Leah was digging around there. Again, that dark smile mixed with a sly grin. The director said, "There you are." His eyes were feverishly shining, as if an obsessive idea was spinning in his head. The man had already started to reach out to the children. He asked Leah why she was hesitating since she had already found Dana. Leah tensed up. She hugged the baby close and understood that she couldn't give her to the director, and even if she had to end up in captivity alone, she needed to protect the girl. She clenched her jaw and was about to dare, when suddenly a voice was heard, and it told the director to step aside. Jack stood in front of the girls and spread his arms out to the sides. He told the man that the children were scared. Leah asked Jack how he got there, but the boy asked if they were okay and not hurt. The girl nodded, hugging Dana. She said that everything was fine. The director was furious and called his pupil a pathetic puppy, so loudly that his teeth chattered. The man asked loudly if he was tired of living, and then a slap was heard. Blood spattered onto the floor. Leah's eyes reflected Jack's sway to the side and fall. All three were thrown onto the attic floor. The man, as he closed the door behind him, called these children pathetic degenerates, and he wished them to rot here as long as they wanted. And then there was silence. The door slammed shut, and the situation repeated itself as before, only now there were 3 of them in the attic. Leah sat up and carefully asked Dana if she was hurt, but the girl was fine. Then Leah turned to Jack and shouted his name. She put her hand on his shoulder, trying to call out to him, but he didn't respond, and a crimson mark from the blow was visible on his cheek. The boy was unconscious. He had some pretty serious wounds, and Leah couldn't just leave it that way. She was wondering how they could get out of here, when suddenly a ray of sunlight, as if giving an answer, penetrated through the wooden cracks into the attic. Leah turned around and ran to the window, her little hands clutching the boards. She couldn't pull them out, so the girl started hitting them with her fist, breaking her hand until it bled. She was driven by the knowledge that Jack's condition was grave, and Dana was frightened, and even if the Duke came sooner or later, some variables could intervene, so it was important to get out quickly. The board cracked under the pressure of the small hand. Dana silently prayed that there had to be some way out. And finally the tree gave way, and so unexpectedly that Leah fell backwards. The girl went to the window and was glad that there was a gap through which she could get out. Leah leaned her body forward to estimate the height from which she would have to jump, but the distance was disappointing. 2 floors without taking into account the attic. The girl understood that if she screamed, they could be heard, but the director would burst in here first, so there was only one way left. Tears welled up in Dana's eyes. She saw her sister's hands and became frightened. But her sister turned to her, and with the warmest and most sincere smile, promised that she would return soon. And he will bring her dad, but while Leah is gone, Dana must take care of her brother. Dana pulled the handle forward. She shouted to her sister. But Leah didn't listen. She jumped out of the window. By that time, Duke Hellas and the knights were approaching the shelter. The man was surprised that the shelter was located in such a remote mountainous area. The head of the knightly order reported that they had examined the surrounding area and found no suspicious traces. The Duke praised her work and asked her to bring the director to him. The man looked surprised and said that he didn't know that such important people had come to their shelter. The director introduced the pupils to the Duke. As Duke Helid had requested, they gathered all the children of the orphanage. The director sat them down on the ground, but these little guys were clearly intimidated. The head of the order whispered to the Duke that Lady Diana's absence did not surprise them, but the director's behavior seemed extremely suspicious. His attitude towards children was especially suspicious, and the Duke said that he thought so too. Elid turned to the little ones and poked them, causing them to shudder and fall silent. The Duke asked if they had seen a girl with silver hair and blue eyes, and the children did not answer at once, 2 of them looking at each other with alarm. The director shouted at the children that they were being asked a question, so they should answer immediately. The children answered the Duke in trembling voices that they did not know, and that they had never met such a girl. The director grinned, because he had invested half of his fortune in concealment artifacts installed in the attic and in the safe, so even the Duke of Hellas would not find the evidence so easily. The Duke warned that lying would result in severe punishment, and the children simultaneously replied that they honestly had not seen it, when suddenly a powerful surge of mana was felt. The head of the order told the Duke that it could not be explained by ordinary reasons, but the man felt it too, as if he could touch the mana that was in the air. The girl asked the director if they could inspect the shelter, and the man almost flinched at such an unexpected question, thus not giving himself away. Leah fell from the attic window to the ground and lost consciousness. The head of the order and the knights found the girl. Bianca Mariette said that it was surprising that they did not sense her mana earlier, but the girl's magic was distorted. The girl understood that if she left everything as it was, her life would be in danger, and then the Duke gave the go-ahead for urgent restoration measures. Suddenly the Duke froze. He heard the voice of a child calling for his father. Dana screamed louder from the window, and Elad turned around, trying to find the source of the sound. When he looked up, he saw his own daughter in the window and he shouted for her to stay put. Hellas ordered the knights to immediately go up and save Diana. Leah came to consciousness with a loud sigh, as if waking up from a long nightmare. The head of the order held her in her arms. She asked the child if she was conscious. Leah turned her head towards her. She could not understand where she was. Imagine Leah's surprise and stupor when she saw the Duke of Hellas looking at her right in front of her. The girl's fingers curled into a weak fist, and she thought at that moment how lucky she was that the Duke had found her, which meant the future had changed. Leah sat down on the ground and began to ask the Duke for help. She told him that her friend Jack was in danger. He was locked upstairs with Dana. Bianca pointed her finger at the director and asked the girl if this man did this. Leah confirmed that the director had always treated them badly and wanted to sell them all into slavery. The man turned completely pale from the girl's words. The head of the order's eyes flashed, clarifying about slavery, but the man shouted that it was a lie. How dare Leah lie to the Duke so brazenly? He blamed her for everything to divert attention. The man swung his hand, but a hand in black gloves stopped him. The head of the order twisted the man's arm and pushed him to the ground, pinning his shoulder to the grass with her boots. She asked Leah if she was okay, and the girl said yes. Annie called out to Leah, asking where she had been all this time. The girl wanted to answer them, but the Duke told them to be quiet. Unless, of course, they want the punishment for lying to catch up with them faster. The children fell silent and hunched over fearfully, looking askance at the Duke of Hellas. Leah clenched her jaw. She guessed that the Duke had managed to meet with the children and interrogate them. Everything was going faster than she expected. So now is not the time to relax. We need to present the evidence that the girl hid last time. Leah carefully took them out with the help of magic and handed them to the Duke, asking him to look at them. She said it was a secret journal with records of all the director's child sales transactions. The man raised his head and asked in irritation how she got it. Leah added that there were records not only of slave trading, but also evidence of theft and corruption. She said that the director never considered them people, and the children denied seeing Dana because he scared them. Helad said that this was true. The children told him that they had never met anyone like Diana. The girl held a magazine in her hands and said that they were scared. They were just children and wanted to survive. Leah involuntarily clutched the white paper and closed her eyes, asking the Duke to show them mercy. The girls joined Leah and began to beg for mercy, thereby admitting that they had lied. Helad picked up the magazine and asked how he could spare them after he said he intended to kill them. He then added that no one would touch them, so they should stop crying. Leah looked up at the Duke with hope and asked, and he then confirmed that he forgave them. The girl sincerely thanked the Duke with all her heart, but the man said that gratitude was unnecessary, since it was his duty to protect children and punish the guilty. Moreover, there is someone here who must be punished. He looked at the director of the shelter. Helad gave the order to shackle him and take him away immediately. He would be interrogated later. The director tried to break free and shout to the Duke, but Helad was adamant. Leah breathed a sigh of relief, as all that was left now was for Jack to be okay. Dana, who was helped out of the attic, immediately ran to Leah. The girl asked if the baby was okay and if she was hurt. The knights noticed that this wayward young lady was behaving very submissively. They guessed that it was this girl who helped them stay here in relative safety. The Duke smiled and softly called Diana. It was time to return home. The little girl ran joyfully towards her daddy. Helad stroked her head. He was going to scold his daughter, but since she was brave and did not cry, this time he would make an exception. The head of the order noted to the Duke that the road ahead was long, and that, in order to decide the fate of the shelter, they should leave as soon as possible. The Duke rose from his knees. He completely agreed with Bianca and gave the order to prepare the carriage. Leah looked down thoughtfully, because the moment of saying goodbye to Dana had come. She knew it would be like this, but for some reason her heart felt heavy, and Dana noticed this change in her sister. The little girl turned to her dad and asked him about her little sister, whether she would go with them. The man replied that if she wanted, she could go. Dana joyfully circled around Leah, hugging her, and the girl froze from the Duke's decision. The events were not supposed to change again, so Leah said that it was Jack, not she, who should go, because he had been with Dana all the time, tried to save her, and even suffered for her. The Duke closed his eyes and replied that they would talk when he woke up. However, he asked about her, whether she wanted to go. Leah knew that this offer was too generous for someone like her, but for some reason she felt like she was taking someone else's place, the place of Jack, who was still unconscious. Dana called her sister and, with great hope in her eyes, suggested that they go together. Leah placed her hand, covered in bruises, on the baby's head. She accepted the offer and Dana was incredibly happy. She wanted to hug her sister again. The little girl closed her eyes and said that she wanted her sister to always be near. Leah stroked her head first. She needed to calm Diana down and make sure that there would be room for Jack, and she would think about her future later. The Duke announced that the carriage would arrive soon, so he asked the girls to wait here. Knight Taze bowed to the young lady Dana, thanking her for remaining unharmed. He also thanked Leah for taking care of the lady, and the girl became embarrassed, waved her hands. She was sure that she did what she had to. Taze approached the Duke and said that he would accept punishment for failing to protect Dana when he returned. He took his father's relic out of his pocket and asked the Duke to accept it, because even if Taze was stripped of his knighthood, he was ready to devote his entire life to protecting the young lady. Heled called Taze a fool, because only he could have thought of using his parents' relic as an oath. He told the knight to take the relic back. He better worry about his future punishment. Leah knew this man, Taze Sadian, a knight who carries a stone-encrusted sword. In the future, he will become Jack's adoptive father and the second in command of the Knightly Order of Rexion. The knight informed the Duke that the carriage was ready, and Eled, Leah, and Dana approached this glittering carriage, which was so luxurious and tall that it looked like something out of a fairy tale. Leah just thought about how luxurious this carriage was, and Eled gently told her to sit down. She was taken aback, asking if she would also ride in this carriage. The Duke thought the girl was afraid that it was too crowded, so he said that there was more than enough room in the carriage for a little girl like her, and Dana said that she wanted to sit with her little sister. Leah decided to give it a try, and when she got inside, the carriage looked no less luxurious. The girl sat down modestly, her shoulders tense, because she was embarrassed to sit in such a shabby state in such an expensive carriage. She looked out the window, noticing movement outside. The other girls from the orphanage waved goodbye to her, clearly amazed that Leah was leaving with the Duke. In a past life, the heroine was in their place and only watched as Jack drove away in this carriage. But now everything is different. The future has changed, which means she can live a new life. Heled asked her name, and because Leah was lost in her thoughts, she did not immediately hear the question. The man repeated it, and also asked how old she was. The girl sheepishly stated her name and age. 8 years old, she had no last name. Dana fell asleep, laying her head on her father's legs. Eled stroked the baby's head. The Duke asked another question, namely, whether Leah knew who Dana was. And did she know who he was? The question sounded serious, but the Duke's gaze was soft in its own way. Leah tensed up. Elada's gaze seemed strange to her. She began to worry that he suspected her of something. The Duke looked at the girl and thought at that time that if he had not seen her fall from the attic and she simply got lost among the children, he would have passed by, taking her for an ordinary orphan. But when this girl desperately clung to him and handed over the evidence, Heled felt strange. It was like being hit on the back of the head. Leah had a thin body. Her legs and arms showed signs of obvious violence. The Duke looked at her with his eyes, but not out of contempt. When he thought about what she had gone through, his heart became heavy. Leah replied that she didn't know the details, but she immediately understood that Dana was special. Then the Duke asked how she was able to take the evidence out, and the girl said that she was cleaning the director's office and accidentally found them, and that she also found out what was happening in the orphanage when she overheard the director's conversation with strangers. Heled smiled and said, "What an unpleasant habit." Leah winced at the remark, her hands clenched into fists on her knees. She had a doubt that the Duke was disappointed in her and now thought she was cunning and mean, so Leah said honestly that she just wanted to protect the children. The smile on Elada's face never left, because this girl was still a child herself, but she had already made such a decision for the sake of others. He decided that Leah was smarter and more observant than he thought. The carriage arrived at the hotel. Duke Hellas asked to take the children to their rooms so they could wash, and then bring the Countess. Bianca approached his lordship and asked if he had called her. Countess Mariette arrived late, but he was grateful to her. Helid asked him to convey his respects to His Excellency, to which Bianca replied that she had only done what was necessary. When she asked why the Duke had called her, the man chuckled and apologized for the unusual request, but he would like her to look after the children while they got ready. The head of the order asked why they had to choose their words so carefully. Of course, she would ensure their safety. Bianca added that it was even for the best. There was still something that needed to be checked. The Duke chuckled questioningly. The girl smiled and said that it was nothing special. Leah was truly happy. She was grateful for the food she was given, and the warm bath and milk with honey were a luxury for her. Suddenly, the girl noticed that Dana's lips were dirty, and the little girl giggled, because Leah's were too. The door to the room opened, and the Countess greeted the young ladies. She asked if they had finished swimming yet. Bianca brought them a change of clothes. The Countess thanked the maids for taking care of the children and dismissed them. The girls stared at the head of the order. Leah greeted her politely. Bianca's clothes were different from the uniform of the Rexian Knights, but this girl had been with the Duke since the orphanage. She seemed familiar to Leah. The Countess smiled and asked the girls if they would go and eat after they changed. Suddenly she fell silent, her eyes landing on Leah. The girl approached her and grabbed her hand. In this position the wound was visible. She asked if this was also the director's hand. Leah hesitated. She wanted to say that the director had beaten them before. This confirmed that the Countess had understood everything correctly about this scoundrel. She wanted to help, but she wasn't at all talented in healing magic, so Bianca decided that she would call the priest when they arrived at the castle. Leah was embarrassed. She said that it was too much for her. The Countess asked the girl not to refuse, because it is everyone's duty to treat those who need help. Bianca was as angry as if it was her own business. She is a warm and fair person. The girl removed her hand and asked the head of the order if she was a mage, since there had been a mention of healing magic. Bianca replied that she didn't know if Leah would understand at that age, but she was a magical knight. This title is not given to everyone. It is a sign that a person has achieved the highest mastery in martial arts and has mastered the aura. Then Leah asked her sister what her name was. The girl introduced herself. Her name was Bianca, but her full name was Bianca Mariette. Leah recognized her. This girl was born a bastard in a poor viscount's house, and thanks to her outstanding skill in fencing and unrivaled magic, she became famous in the war and received the title of Countess. She is exactly the person Leah has always admired. And right now, she stood right in front of the girl. Leah clenched her hand into a fist in excitement. She thanked the Countess for saving her after she fell from the attic, but Bianca considered it a trifle. She did what she had to. The Countess lightly threw a white towel over the girl's head so that she could dry her hair and asked if all the questions had been resolved. They got acquainted. Now it was time to get ready for dinner. Dana and Leah looked at each other in towels and laughed. The door to the dining room opened. The Countess brought the young ladies to His Excellency, who had changed into clean and neat clothes. The Duke thanked Bianca for her efforts, but she kept saying it was nothing. Dana called her sister to sit next to her. She even pulled out a chair. Leah hesitated. She didn't know if she could sit at the same table with the Duke when there was such a difference in status between them. Helid told her to sit down and eat, and only then did the girl sit down next to her. The food on the table was fragrant, juicy, and spicy. Leah hadn't eaten anything like this for a long time, and the sight of such food brought a blush to her cheeks. The maid approached the decanter and whispered something in her ear. Bianca approached the Duke. She had an urgent matter to report, and the man asked why not eat first. Was it really something important? It turned out that the leader of the order urgently needed to return to the duchy. The Duke was surprised that this was needed so suddenly, but His Grace contacted Bianca through a magical channel. It seemed that something urgent had happened. Elid said that he would like to thank the Countess when they arrived at the ducal castle, but it seemed that it would not be possible. Leah's finger twitched, upset that Bianca was already leaving, because they hadn't even really had time to talk. Countess Mariette noticed this with her piercing eyes. She approached the girl and extended her hand to her, thereby inviting her to go with her. Leah was all alarmed. She pointed at herself with her index finger, thus clarifying that this was really about her, that she would go with her. The Duke asked the Countess what this meant, and the girl replied that it was exactly what she had said. She wanted to take Leah with her. When Bianca first saw this girl, she immediately felt that she had enormous magical potential, but because she could not control mana, it only harmed her. Now she needs someone who can guide her and teach her control, of course, only if she wants it herself. Elid didn't know why the Countess had suddenly decided to suggest this, but she needn't have worried, since they had more than enough experienced mages in the ducal house. Bianca wanted to object, and then the Duke asked directly, was she really going to take an imperial subject to the duchy without any special reason? The girl had no such intentions, and she asked Leah what she wanted. At first the girl was embarrassed, but after a while she and Dana were riding in a carriage. Leah's idol offered to go with her. It felt like a dream. But it wasn't that simple. Dana grabbed her sister by the sleeve and capriciously stopped her. Dana pulled Leah towards her, tears welling up in her eyes. She didn't want to part with her little sister. She plaintively asked Leah not to leave, because she would feel bad if she left. The heroine did not expect such a reaction. The little girl's affection turned out to be stronger than could have been expected. Leah pursed her lips. She had to make a firm decision. If she went with Bianca, she would be kind to her. Leah would be able to see her strength with her own eyes. However, the girl apologized to the Countess and said that she would not be able to go with her. Bianca felt sorry for her, but it was the girl's choice, and she did not want to interfere with it in any way. However, she said that if Leah ever wanted to find her, she should come to the Duchy of Bellis, because Bianca was almost always in the Grand Ducal residence. She just needed to say her name. Leah looked the Countess straight in the eyes, as if enchanted. She admired her. The girl decided that if she ever became stronger and found courage, she would definitely come to Bianca. It seemed that Leah herself had become very attached to Dana, because as soon as she saw the girl clinging to her, sobbing, the thought of leaving simply disappeared. It would be a lie to say that Leah wasn't sorry, but it wasn't just about the responsibility for Jack and Diana. Most of the information Leah has concerns the Empire itself, and if she wants to use her knowledge further, she'd better stay here. In her past life, she tried her best to gain the recognition of others, and what did it lead to? Leah had no intention of continuing on her old path. She would no longer cling to that approval of others and to others in order to survive. In this life, she wanted to stand on her own feet by using her powers and knowledge in the future. The road was long, and her thoughts were spinning incessantly, and as soon as Leah closed her eyes, it was already morning, and she was stretching in the carriage as soon as she woke up. The girl didn't know much about the Duchy of Bellis, only that Duke Bellis would later become Diana's godfather, and also that in the past he was the only great magician of the Empire. But when Leah grew up in her past life, it was no longer he who was famous, but his son, the heir to the Duchy of Bellis, whose beauty was considered unmatched. When he and the son of the Duke of Hellas appeared together, people said it was like the sun and moon in the same sky. Leah hadn't even thought about it, but since she was going to live in the Duke's house, it seemed she would have to meet him, the one she saw at the last moment of her death. The last person she saw before she died, and who so desperately called her name, holding her in his arms. The Duke gently knocked on the carriage window and asked the girl to wake up Dana. They finally arrived home, and while Dana walked the entire way yawning, Leah couldn't take her eyes off the mansion. When you see the ducal mansion in person, the impression is completely different. The boy who saw the carriage immediately headed towards it and rushed towards Dana with hugs. Alan Heled, the Duke's second son, held her tightly to him and asked his sister where she had been. A woman in white clothes appeared behind him, her reddish hair looking so delicate in combination with the golden color of her eyes. Even the maids were so worried that they wiped away tears when the family reunion finally happened. Tears appeared on the mother's face. She missed her baby very much. Dana broke free from her brother's embrace and jumped into her mother's arms, hugging her. Leah smiled. She knew that the Duchess was in front of her, and she felt good that everything was back to normal. While she was wondering when she would be handed over to the head maid, Alan looked at the girl. He casually asked her who she was. Leah was surprised and asked if he was talking to her, but there was no one else nearby. The boy asked her point-blank why the girl had followed his little sister, as if she had followed her with some kind of intention. Diana heard this. She ran up to Leah and stood in front of her, blocking her with her body. She shouted at this pathetic parasite not to hurt her princess. Alan was speechless. He even turned pale when he heard such words from his own sister. The Duchess was no less surprised. She even covered her mouth with her hand, for it was indecent to show such strong emotions. Leah herself was taken aback by what Dana had just said. She had probably heard these words from the director. She leaned over to the little girl and said that this was a bad word, that you can't call your older brother that, and that it was rude to repeat the words after the director. The Duke's dark figure loomed over the girls, swearing to God that when he got the director's confession, he would knock the bastard's teeth out. Duke Hellas looked so angry that Leah was a little confused. She didn't know what to do, so she apologized, saying that she should have kept a better eye on Dana. The Duchess approached Hellas and asked him why he was speaking so rudely in front of the child, since he himself could see that she was repeating everything the adult said, and the man coughed loudly. The woman looked at Leah and asked when he was going to introduce her to this lovely girl. Leah greeted the Duchess shyly, and Elad introduced her as a nice girl who looked after Dana at the orphanage. Diana smiled happily, hugging her little sister. She did not leave her side for a step and called Leah her princess. Alan, who was frozen in shock, asked how he was, then Dana told her sister not to be afraid. She would protect her from him. The Duchess praised her daughter for her bravery, but Alan almost had a heart attack. His little sister ignored him, even though he was so looking forward to seeing his sweet Diana. The Duchess ordered a room to be prepared for Leah, and the servants bowed obediently. The woman, who was smiling happily, said that on such a happy day a little guest had come to them and they should feed her lunch. The heroine's head began to spin when she was also handed over to the maids and ordered to change into new clothes while Dana introduced her to the family. The little girl led her sister around the Duke's castle and brought her to her room. It was so huge that Leah couldn't believe that this whole place was for one person, and while the girl was looking around, Dana found a book. The little girl handed the book to her sister and asked her to read a story. Leah asked if this was Dana's favorite book, and it turned out she was spot on. The maids were nearby right now, and this was a great opportunity for Leah. If she showed that she could read, then perhaps she would be allowed to continue looking after Dana. As soon as the heroine was about to read the story, the Duchess entered the room and asked what the girls were doing. She saw that they were engrossed in the book, and Dana told them that the princess was about to read to her. Mom told the little girl that Leah needed to go away with her for a while to run some errands, and that they would read later. Dana asked how she was. The Duchess thought about it. She would like to take the little girl with her, but she said that the room needed to be decorated a little so that Dana and the princess could play together today, since it was too modest here for such an important guest. Dana cried out for them to come back quickly then. Since they now had the little lady's permission, the Duchess took Leah by the hand. She smiled amiably and invited the girl to come with her. Leah was very embarrassed by such warmth and friendliness. She followed the Duchess. However, the girl was worried, and at the same time she was interested in where the madam had decided to go only with her. Suddenly, disturbing thoughts began to creep into her head, because even if Leah saved the Duchess's daughter, she was still of low birth, so there was a chance that she would be separated from Dana. When they reached the tall, bright door, the Duchess announced that they had arrived. They both went inside, where a priest was waiting for them. She was dressed, as expected, in a light cassock, on which hung a golden cross. The woman greeted the girl warmly and told her that Countess Mariette had sent her a letter. Bianca wanted Leah's wounds healed with magic. The heroine had already thought that the head of the order had forgotten about her, but then an official letter arrived. The woman carefully took the girl's hand to first examine the wound. Seeing the scar on the delicate skin, she said that Leah must be very upset. The woman placed her palm on the girl's head and told her not to worry. She would heal her now, and there would be no more pain. The mage concentrated her powers in her palm, from which warmth began to emanate. A blue light appeared in this area and began to spread throughout the room. Suddenly, shock appeared on the woman's face as she felt an electric shock coming from Leah. The Duchess asked excitedly if any problems had arisen. The magician said, puzzled, that for some reason her divine power was not working. She pulled her hand away from the girl's head. It was the first time the woman had encountered something like this. The Duchess and Leah sat on a white bench after being told there was no treatment possible. The woman said that everything would be fine. There were other priests in the duchy who specialized in healing magic. She wanted to support the girl. Leah smiled and said that it was okay. She understood everything. Although she herself was overcome with inner unrest, the fact that the scar could not be removed was not so bad. The bigger problem was that divine power did not work on a citizen of the empire who was blessed at birth. The girl thought that something was really wrong with her, and when she turned to the Duchess, the woman pressed her finger on the girl's lips. Leah was embarrassed and covered her mouth with her hands. The Duchess put a chocolate bar in her mouth and called it a magic cure for sadness. The Duchess asked if things had gotten any better. Leah remembered something like that. Memories of a soft voice asking her if the girl was feeling better after he gave her a chocolate bar too began to spin in her head. Leah admitted that she really did feel better. The Duchess was delighted and invited her to dinner. The girl followed her. She thought that this woman was kind even to such an ordinary child. Leah was very grateful to her, but someone was sitting sullenly at the table and did not take his eyes off the girl. She knew this dinner was going to be tough when she noticed Alan staring at her. Dana speared a piece of meat with her fork and offered it to her sister. Alan indignantly shouted that he would not eat at the same table with this girl, and Dana kept offering to try different dishes of Leah. The heroine was already beginning to dream of being killed. When Leah finally swallowed the food silently, the boy snorted and said that she was only filling her belly. Then Dana shouted at him not to talk to his sister like that, and Alan's insides sank. He stood up from the table and accused Diana of not loving her older brother at all. The boy shouted with tears in his eyes that he hated Dana. Leah asked the madam for forgiveness because of her, the gentleman ran away. However, the Duchess believed that she should apologize for her son's behavior. Alan was still young and did not know how to behave with strangers. He also doesn't like vegetables and can't fall asleep without a toy, just like a little boy. Leah thought that yes, the famous swordsman, who half the girls in the Empire were crazy about, had revealed a new side to him. The Duchess decided she had enough about Alan and invited Leah to have dessert. The girl admitted that she was already full, which surprised the Duchess because Leah hadn't eaten even half of it. Growing up in an orphanage, she was constantly hungry, so her stomach didn't function quite as it should. It seemed like it was already full. Even though Leah had eaten a little, it wasn't used to tasty food. The Duchess said that's why the girl is so small. She eats like a bird. Does she really want Dana to catch up with her? So Leah was persuaded to have dessert, and the Duchess praised her for her good decision. The mother and daughter watched Leah closely as she ate the dessert, as if they were afraid she wouldn't finish it. When Leah tried a piece of the sweet, she was amazed at how delicious it was. The Duchess even clapped her hands with joy. She said that their chefs prepare the most excellent desserts. The atmosphere at the table changed. It became warmer and more joyful. The girls were laughing and chatting, and Leah thought what could be better than a delicious lunch in good company. Meanwhile, Alan sat under the bushes, his knees pulled up, and muttered about how hungry he was. The next morning, the Duchess ordered that some space be cleared in the room and the furniture rearranged. Suddenly, Dana ran into the room at full speed, calling for her mother. The little girl rushed to hug her, and the madam asked what was wrong, why Dana was running like that. The girl raised her blue eyes to her mother and blurted out that her little sister was feeling unwell. Indeed, Leah's condition worsened. She was lying on the bed in the heat with a cool towel on her forehead. The doctor explained that Miss Leah had some body aches and that she should feel better with enough rest. Her diet should also be monitored, as the girl has weak digestion, and the Duchess began to blame herself for persuading her to eat dessert. She apologized to Leah, who was breathing heavily due to a high temperature. By this time, the magician from the tower, Tellin, arrived. The Duchess greeted him, and he was told that someone here needed help. He was told that the girl's wounds needed to be healed, and Tellin approached the bed. He found a scar on her hand. The Duchess asked if Leah could be cured with healing magic, because, oddly enough, divine power did not work on her. The boy replied that if Miss had very high mana purity, then it might be incompatible with divine power. He felt magical energy in her, and perhaps this was just such a case. He couldn't say for sure, but he decided to try and place his palm on her hand. His power concentrated in his palm, a blue stream of energy swirling in the air. Small particles dissolved into space, thus doing their work. The Duchess covered her mouth with her hand. She admired what she saw. The scar had healed. She thanked Tellin and said that she didn't even know how to thank him. The boy looked at the lady and asked with a serious face where they found this child. A few days later, the Duchess was informed that the Duke had returned. The woman asked him how he was, and Helid replied that everything was fine. He apologized for leaving her alone with the children. Taking off his robe, the man asked how Leah was, if she was feeling better. It turned out that her temperature had dropped the previous evening. The Duchess also said that Tellin came and healed her scar. The Duke remarked that it was somehow strange. The divine power had no effect, but the healing magic had on the contrary, and the madam was explained that this was possible if a person had a high concentration of mana in the body. Elid asked if Leah had any magical abilities, and the Duchess nodded meekly. Tellin had already been buzzing her ears about Leah's enormous potential for magic, and had even furiously asked for permission to take her with him to the tower, which had made the Duchess afraid that he would wake up the sick child. Elid lowered his gaze thoughtfully. When they entered the room, he asked his wife how she felt about Leah and whether it was worth leaving the child with Diana. The woman said that they had known each other for only a short time, but she thought that she was a good girl, kind, obedient, and didn't complain, even when she was in pain. The Duchess understood why Countess Mariette was so worried about her. Perhaps Leah reminded her of herself as a child. Suddenly, the woman gasped and said that she had been talking too much and that she couldn't leave the child alone. The Duke turned his head towards the half-open door, remembering that Leah had a habit of eavesdropping on conversations. He calmly said that everything was fine. Elad looked at the girl through the half-open door, saying that the Duchess did not need to go anywhere. Leah froze, looking the Duke straight in the eyes. He caught her in such an awkward activity. The Duchess was surprised when she saw the girl and asked when she woke up. Leah tucked her hands in, awkwardly greeting Madame. The woman leaned over to her and bombarded her with questions about whether the girl was scared when she woke up all alone, and whether she was feeling well. Before Leah could answer, Helid approached his wife from behind and asked the girl why she had come to him. The girl timidly replied that she needed to tell him something. Helid was surprised that she had only just opened her eyes and already wanted to talk to him, but nevertheless, he invited her in. The Duchess placed a concerned hand on Leah's shoulder, asked if the girl was feeling tired, and added that she would wait for her in the room after the conversation. Helid invited the girl to sit down. He said that she was just in time, because he also had something to tell her, and Leah froze. She involuntarily thought that this concerned her situation. The Duke shared that with the help of the orphanage director's book, which she gave him, they managed to catch all the nobles and traders involved in the slave trade. The evidence is compelling, so they will be sentenced to severe punishment. Then Leah said that her friend Jack suffered then. She asked how he was. The Duke said that her friend had long since woken up safely, and his body had been fully restored. He told Leah that he would try to visit the duchy in the near future, and the girl turned a little pale. She was afraid that Jack's story would end there. The girl decided that this was not right, and even jumped up from the sofa. She exclaimed that Jack would become a magnificent knight. She spoke passionately about how he was the strongest and tallest child in the orphanage, trained every day without exception, and even when the director punished him, he endured until the very end and never cried. Leah assured him that the Duke would understand everything himself as soon as he saw him once, and the man grinned. He said there was no need to worry. He had already taken action, and Leah thanked him. Suddenly, Helid asked what she wanted. He pointed his finger at her. Leah kept talking about other people, so he repeated what she wanted. The girl's palms were sweaty. She hadn't thought about it, and she had never been asked about it, but she said that she would serve Dana. Elad assumed that she had heard from Countess Mariette that she had mana, and the mage who was treating Leah said that her reserves were quite large, which was probably why the effect of the healing spells was stronger. The Duke understood that Leah was still young, and therefore could not fully comprehend, but the presence of mana meant that limitless possibilities were open to her. However, it would be difficult to manage it alone. Leah would need help, and Elad reminded her that there were many experienced magicians in the duchy. If she wanted to become one, the choice was hers. The Duke said softly that he would support the girl. But Leah asked what would happen if she refused. Would she then have to go to an orphanage like the other children? Elad didn't expect to hear such a question, especially when Leah added that she wanted to do the work of a servant. She realized now that she was refusing a very generous offer, but she was forced to do it. Receiving support from the nobles means submitting to this family, and this contradicts her plan to someday leave this place and live freely. The most important thing for her now was to find a place for Jack. The girl assured that she could take good care of Dana, that is, her mistress. She could serve food, make the bed, and also read books. She added that she was good at cleaning, since she did it every day at the shelter, and the Duke sighed. He said that she could do as she wished. The girl was happy and said thank you. Leah said that in that case she would return to the room. The heroine rushed down the corridor in excitement. Everything turned out the way she wanted, but her soul was uneasy. Just when she thought she didn't want to be disappointed anymore by trusting someone, she suddenly bumped into someone. It happened so fast and hard that Leah fell to the floor. Alan gave her a rude poke, asking why she was leaving his father's office. Leah rose up. She wanted to tell what was going on. Then Alan suddenly grabbed her by the shoulders and started shouting that the girl didn't have enough of Dana and her mother, and that she had now decided to switch to his father. Suddenly the boy stopped and looked at the girl's hands. They were unusually thin. Alan turned away and told Leah not to be so smug because Diana treated her well. He also asked where she was rushing to, whether it was urgent, and Leah replied that she was going to meet a friend who was coming to the duchy. The boy sarcastically expressed surprise that she had friends. The girl sincerely replied that, of course, they had become friends with him back in the orphanage, and he had helped her a lot in saving Mrs. Diana. She began to list how kind and diligent Jack was, how he possessed all the virtues of a knight. Alan looked at Leah as she chatted, and his hand reached out to her. The boy tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear, and Leah fell silent in surprise. He explained that her hair was disheveled. The girl shuddered at such a sudden change in mood. She awkwardly thanked Alan. He grinned and asked why she was so surprised, as if she had seen a ghost. Footsteps were heard in the corridor. Leah's name was called. She looked around. It was Jack. He said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time and asked how she was feeling. Leah was so happy to see him that she immediately ran up to Jack and grabbed his hands. She began to ask him if he was okay and if anything hurt. Leah suddenly realized she had just been too friendly and decided to keep her distance, briefly thanking him for coming. The girl stepped back and Alan's hand fell on her shoulder. He yelped unceremoniously, looking Jack straight in the eyes. Leah was standing between them. Alan didn't take his eyes off him, but turned to the girl with a question, "Is this her friend?" Jack looked back into his eyes, tension hanging in the air between them. The boy looked down at Leah's shoulder, where Alan's hand lay so lightly. Leah didn't understand what was going on, because Jack had probably heard about the duchy and Alan, but why was he so hostile? Besides, in their previous life, they had been inseparable friends, although children usually quarrel a lot when they grow up, so Leah convinced herself that everything would be fine. She asked Jack why he came. The girl wanted to see him off if he didn't mind. Alan noticed the knight in the hallway. He looked at him, but asked Leah what kind of nonsense this was. Taze almost caught up with Jack and bowed, greeting Mr. Allen. The boy said that this was impudence on the part of the knight. He failed to cope with Diana's protection and was again trying to get hold of their house. Alan shouted that, as his teacher had said, commoners by nature simply knew no bounds in insolence, and when Leah heard this, she reached out to the boy to stop him. However, Thais calmly agreed with him and said that it was entirely his fault. The knight bowed again, saying that if the young master accused him, he was ready to take full responsibility. This seemed to irritate Alan even more. He cursed loudly and turned in the opposite direction, walking away. It was too much, but Leah knew how much Alan cared about Dana, and he shouldn't be delayed. Another male voice was heard. Taze's comrade asked him if he didn't think it was unfair. Leah froze in excitement. She didn't know who it was, but the man's build resembled that of a knight. The guy asked if his lordship had said something wrong, but it was his will, so he would have to accept it. Cutting off his hands would not have been enough, and Taze got off with only a few punishments. Shamelessness must know its limits. A lump rose in Taze's throat, and he calmly asked if the guy really thought that. The knight admits that he failed the task, but even he, the second in command, is not perfect. The guy grabbed Taze by the collar and called him a scoundrel. He barked, "Does the knight really think he can say whatever he wants?" Leah felt that there was clearly a hidden meaning in this man's words. Was there really something more behind Dana's disappearance? Taze calmly asked the deputy to stop. "There are children here." The deputy commander looked over Taze's shoulder when he mentioned the children and said mockingly that the boy was apparently so scared that he was silent as a fish. He pointed his index finger at Jack's forehead and called him little. The boy said that the boy should not dream of any nonsense, since he was lucky enough to get into the troop of knights thanks to the grace of his lordship. He will live as a servant, cleaning and washing. Taze yelled at the deputy to stop. Jack was just a kid. The deputy asked with a grin how long they had known each other, that he was defending him in front of his superiors. How touching. He turned his back on them and expressed his unwillingness to talk to those who did not understand their place. When he left, Taze turned to Leah and asked if she was okay. He apologized for appearing in front of her in such an unsightly state, but the girl assured that everything was fine. Then the knight said that he and Jack needed to greet the Duke, so they would go. Jack and Taze had already started walking. Only then Leah was able to pull herself together and shouted after the uncle. She asked him to tell her, if it wasn't too much trouble for the knight, why the deputy commander was behaving this way. That day, as usual, Taze was supposed to guard the lady, but in the morning he learned from the deputy that he had been removed from the security detail. The knight thought it was just a change in schedule, but something was bothering him, so he followed the guards as they headed to the village. It didn't take long to follow the guards. By that time, the lady had already disappeared, and all that was left of her was a hair clip with blue ribbons lying on the asphalt. Leah exclaimed that it wasn't Taze's fault. She asked how the deputy commander of the knightly order Lexian could lie like that. It was beyond comprehension. Jack turned his gaze to the knight and asked him if he really was innocent. The knight swore that he had done nothing of the sort, but he felt somehow uncomfortable telling the children what had happened. Taze was once a mercenary and fought in the war, and after he uncovered the enemy's trap, he was noticed by his lordship. From that day on, the boy became the object of envy of the deputy, who was proud to be close to the Duke. Taze recalled that joining the Lexian Knight Legion was his greatest joy, but lately he had been wondering why he continued to be a knight. The guy even began to think that the deputy commander was right in that he was not worthy of this title, and then Leah screamed, calling the man a fool. When the girl saw this bewilderment on the knight's face, she awkwardly continued that the deputy was to blame. He had acted inappropriately. Taze said he hadn't told the duke because he didn't want to cause trouble, and Leah blurted out that if the knight truly cared about his lordship, he should have told him. The boy sighed and lowered his head, asking who would believe the words of a simple knight, originally from commoners. These words struck a chord with Leah, especially after Taze said there was no evidence left. The knight asked for forgiveness and understanding of the situation, but the girl expressed strong disagreement. She said with a smile that the uncle must have his own personal reasons, but she had behaved too impudently. Leah bowed and admitted that when she saw in front of her the culprit who had caused Dana so much trouble, she simply could not restrain herself and became so angry. Now the heroine left, citing business. Both boys looked after her, Taze thoughtfully, Jack surprised. Leah ran further down the corridor, unaware that the knight was mentally apologizing to her for being so helpless. The girl had no intention of slowing down. She was in a hurry. Leah didn't understand why Taze gave up so quickly. She also couldn't believe that Jack was being treated like that in a knightly order. Was it normal to behave like that with commoners? Leah felt annoyed that she knew nothing and lived in luxury in the Duke's house while Jack suffered such humiliation. The girl felt dizzy from running so fast, and she put her hand on the column, deciding that she couldn't just give up. If Leah leaves things as they are, he will stay with Dana. Now the heroine faced a new goal: to find evidence of the deputy's crime. The days in the castle as a servant passed well. Leah felt joyful. The maids greeted her and gave her instructions. This time it was to deliver something to the training ground. The girl promised to do it, and the maid praised her, stroking her head. The sisters always smiled at her warmly and wished her a good day. The maids liked her because she had only just arrived, but she was so polite from the very beginning and tried very hard. A whole week had passed since Leah had become a servant in the Duke's house. The job suited her, and perhaps thanks to the kindness of the other servants, it had not been difficult to get used to it. Suddenly, Leah was stopped by a girl in the hallway. Anya asked if she had really decided to go and leave without looking in on her. The maid handed the girl a fresh apple pie, carefully wrapped in yellow cloth, and the girl was grateful. Leah suddenly said that she wanted to ask something. She approached the maid and stood on her toes to whisper in her ear whether Anya knew anything about the deputy commander. The County of Valerie is a family that has played a key role in the Lexian knightly order for generations. The current head of the family, Count Valerie, is an influential man who even holds the post of chairman of the Council of Elders of the ducal house. Sid, who was used to considering himself the best because he came from such a family, clearly considered Thais an eyesore because he was a commoner. Moreover, the problem is that he is Alan's fencing mentor, and now it is clear why this boy has such a character. While Leah was wondering how Sid, being someone's mentor, could do this to Jack, Dana said hello to her mom. The Duke and Duchess were dressed smartly and entered the room together to ask the children if everything was well. Leah said welcome back to Madame, and the Duchess, hugging her daughter, asked if anything had happened while they were away. Elad picked up little Diana in his arms and gently asked if she really didn't notice her dad at all. Dana asked her parents to read her a book. Leah watched the family idle from the sidelines, and this scene carried her thoughts so far away that the Duchess did not call her the first time. The girl started and responded when Madame approached her. The Duchess asked what was troubling Leah, but the girl replied that everything was fine and asked to go to the training ground to pass on something. The girl ran away so quickly that the Duchess looked at the open door in the room for a while. She was worried about her. Leah considered that, first of all, she should discuss the information she had gathered with her uncle and Jack, and if she continued to stand her ground, maybe the knight would understand her. Suddenly Leah stopped. She heard shouts of someone calling someone a bastard for touching their wooden swords. Her eyes widened and turned to Jack. The boy was surrounded. He stood in the middle. The atmosphere was oppressive. They mocked him, for Sir Valerie had told them that Jack was different from those who would become knights, and who would even want to take him as an apprentice. Jack's brow furrowed when they said that the only one who would take him would be Taze, who had once been a wandering mercenary. The taller guy asked what that look was. Was he really going to fight them? He took a swing, calling Jack an insolent cur. One blow sent the boy to the ground and his back hitting the wooden box. The guys were going to teach such an impudent fellow a proper lesson. Leah jumped up and ran to Jack. He calmly asked why she had come again, and Leah shouted that she had been afraid that something like this would happen. The offender asked with a grin what this was. Another beggar came. Leah shouted that it was cowardice for a crowd to mock one person, and after all this they thought they were worthy of becoming honest knights. She screamed so loudly that the boys backed away. The girl defended Tae's Sadian, saying that he was a man who was personally knighted by the Duke and received a title with a surname. The offender leaned forward and replied that Tace was a commoner who was a mercenary and killed anyone for money. Leah shouted, "What does it matter? Can't commoners or mercenaries become knights?" And the guy didn't answer. He didn't know what. The heroine knew that he would not be able to object, because there was no such law. Unlike aristocrats who learn fencing from childhood, commoners who have to earn a living are limited in their opportunities from the start. Leah said mockingly that the boys themselves were nothing special, and if they wanted to become knights, they should first learn to be people. A voice came from behind her. Alan asked what they were doing here. The offenders began to complain about Leah, saying that she had insulted them and said that they were nothing special. Leah looked at this picture and mentally thought that these idiots still couldn't pull themselves together and immediately rushed to complain. The girl confirmed their complaints and added that these guys weren't even worth a hit from her. She pointed her finger at the offender, saying that if he didn't believe her, then let him come out here, one-on-one with her. Leah would be bored if the tall one gave up right away. She asked Alan if he would grant her wish if he won. The girl told the tall one to take the wooden sword if he wanted. The boy raised an eyebrow and told her not to show off. This so-called knight actually stood up to the girl one-on-one, and with a sword at that. Jack shouted at Leah what she was doing. It was better if he did it, but the girl stopped him with a gesture. She wanted to answer for her words. The offender asked with a grin if she was really going to fight without a weapon. Leah replied that it was convenient for her, but she had something with her. The heroine took out a comb and tossed it in the air, which looked ridiculous. But she was sure that she could handle it. The heroine winked at the tall guy. Alan turned pale and asked the girl what the hell that was. The heroine replied that it was the mistress's comb, but the guy wasn't asking about that. He didn't believe that she was going to fight with it. Leah smiled and confirmed, because she almost never jokes. Alan grabbed the offender by the ear and pulled him towards himself. He spoke with a depressing aura and a clear warning that the guy should not dare to hurt her. Having said these words, Alan sent the boy back to his place, and now he stood in front of Leah, who pointed the comb at him like a cannon. The Duke's son shouted that if he told them to stop, they should do it immediately. He told them to get ready. The guy looked at the girl tensely now. It became even more difficult to do anything after Alan's words. Leah smiled, looking her offender straight in the eye as Alan announced the start of the competition. This impudent child was even smirking, holding his sword in front of him, so the heroine was going to teach him a proper lesson. He chuckled and asked if she was scared, then he would come first. Before he could take a step, Leah ran up to him and gave the guy a good slap on the cheek with a comb. His head was thrown back by the blow, drooling from his mouth and leaving a bright abrasion on his face. Jack's mouth opened wide in astonishment. Alan turned even paler and froze. The offender fell onto the asphalt, and the Duke's son said that it was just a coincidence, as if he was trying to convince himself. Leah turned to him, causing him to flinch. The girl said that she had won. It was important for her to know whether he would fulfill his promise. After this, the heroine began to practice magic. She pressed her palms to the ground and concentrated her power. Green leaves grew on the tree. Leah said it was as easy as pie. It was an abandoned garden behind the ducal castle, rarely visited by people, and Leah discovered this place by chance while running errands. After arriving at the Duke's house, her physical fitness had improved enough that she could begin mana training, and this garden was a suitable place. However, despite the loneliness of the place, Leah was not alone there that day. A male voice asked what she was doing here. Sid came up behind her and asked if she, a nobody, had really used the gentleman to lure him here. The girl stood up from the ground and said that yes, that's how it was. The deputy called her small but already cunning, who likes to use Madame Diana to live in luxury, although Leah should thank her for this all her life. Then the heroine said that if she followed the uncle's words, she should thank him, not the lady. Leah crossed her arms over her chest, asking how she would have met Dana if it weren't for him. The deputy leaned towards her and asked her to repeat. The girl said that he heard everything perfectly. After all, it was he who lied to Sir Cedian that his schedule had changed. Leah put her hand out and shouted, as if into a megaphone, that he wanted to get rid of Sir Cedian and put the lady's safety on the line. Sid shouted that this was nonsense. He pointed his finger at her, indignant that she dared to threaten him without evidence, as if she really wanted to die. And even if it was true, who would believe the words of a servant like her or Tace? And then Leah replied that it was up to the Duke to decide whether to believe it or not. Sid Valerie winced at her words, grabbed her by the collar and shouted that such insignificant worms could only be content with the scraps they threw away. The Duchess heard everything with her own ears. Moreover, she witnessed the deputy grab the girl. She asked Sir Valerie to stop. She asked what he had done here anyway. Sid let go of the girl and tensely answered the lady that it was not what she thought. The Duke approached his wife and told his deputy not to even think about making excuses. Valerie turned blue with the realization that his lordship was here too. The Duchess ran to Leah, who had fallen to the ground, and asked with concern if she was okay. The girl smiled kindly even after what happened and said that everything was fine. Everything went exactly as she planned. At lunch, she told the lady that she had been out for a walk and had seen some sprouts appearing in the back garden. The Duchess was pleasantly surprised by this because the ground was still frozen. She took care of her busy husband and accompanied him on walks at certain times, so Leah was confident that if she mentioned something interesting in front of her in advance, she would definitely come. If things hadn't gone according to plan, the girl was going to go to the Duke to tell him everything, but everything turned out much more successfully. Sid was on his knees and trying to shift the blame onto Taze. He insisted that it was a trap, and the Duchess said that if this was true, then the Parian mine had also been purchased on the orders of Lord Sidian. Leah exclaimed that Mr. Tease had no idea about the budget of the knightly order. Sid's face was white as snow. It seemed like he was about to fall to his death. The deputy turned to the girl and asked how she found out. The knights came running at the call of his lordship, and Helid ordered the immediate arrest of Sir Valerie. He looked sternly into the traitor's eyes, deciding to take punitive measures later. Sid started screaming, begging for another chance. And then they didn't know that little Alan was watching all of this. He covered his mouth with his hands so as not to make a sound when he saw his teacher being taken away by the guards. After the duel between Leah and the offender, Alan asked Leah what she wanted so much that she caused all this commotion. The girl asked to be allowed to meet with Deputy Commander Sid. Leah looked away, asking the boy in a girlish way that if it wasn't too much trouble. Alan's cheeks even turned pink. This request wasn't a problem for him. But he wanted to know what business Leah had with his teacher, but she couldn't say now, and besides, the master had promised. Alan had no choice but to agree, and Leah thanked him with all her joy. He agreed to it because it was a promise. But he didn't understand why this was necessary, so he decided to hide and observe the meeting place, and eventually saw how the teacher, begging for mercy, was taken away. The Duchess told her husband that she and Leah would go first. The child needed to calm down. At this time, Alan looked out from behind a tree and saw that they were about to leave. The boy watched this, while excitement took root deep within him. On the way to the castle, the woman wanted to talk to the girl. She turned to her and said that she would not ask her about what happened. But the lady wanted to scold the girl for acting so recklessly. She squatted down opposite Leah and, taking her hands, asked if the girl would do that again. Leah promised that she would and apologized for the inconvenience. She swallowed the lump that had come up. The heroine was glad that she had managed to remove a heavy burden from her soul. Because she knows the future of two houses, the Count's house of Valerie and the Duke's house of Hellas. In her past life, Leah was picked up by a master when she was only 10 years old, and to prove her usefulness, she learned everything indiscriminately, including martial arts, stealth, and magic. The girl read all the newspapers and reports she could find in the guild, and then she learned about it by chance. The case of the Count's house of Valerie, who deceived one of the great families, the Duchy of Hellas. It was discovered that the Count's house of Valerie, through the deputy commander, was misappropriating the order's budget and accumulating wealth, and the case was brought to court. Moreover, diamonds were discovered in the Parian mine, purchased with stolen money, which allowed Valerie to resort to bribery and graft, which made the trial difficult for the Helid family. But since Leah knows about it 2 years before it is revealed, if she starts acting now, difficulties can be avoided. This is how the little girl repaid the Duke for his favor. The Duchess took Leah's hand and, smiling, told her to follow her. The madam brought the girl not to the usual place, but to the very magical tower of the duchy. Inside, the magicians studied important questions. They conducted experiments and worked diligently to create potions. When Leah walked inside, she couldn't take her eyes off the hard magical work, the smell, and the objects around her. The Duchess said that she had come here because of this child. She wanted to be treated, so she asked for Tellin to be called. As soon as Mr. Tellin was called, he immediately rushed up the stairs. He ran to Leah with all his joy and open arms, calling her his student. Tellin was waiting for her. The magician leaned towards the girl, saying that he knew she would come to him sooner or later, and even when the Duke said that she refused to be his student, Tellin did not believe her. The Duchess gently pushed the magician's face away, asking him to come to his senses. After all, they came here exclusively for treatment, which upset Tellin. The Duchess put her arm around Leah's shoulders and asked Tellin to assist her. The boy created a blue circle with his index finger, asking the girl why she was injured every time they met. The circle opened and a bright light flashed in the middle, blowing Leah's hair like the wind. The abrasions on the girl's neck had disappeared, and Tellin happily announced that that was all. Leah thought about how the holy power hadn't worked, and he had been able to heal everything. She guessed that it was Tellin who had erased her scar when she was unconscious. The amount of mana and Leah's affinity made a special impression on the magicians. They covered her face with their shadow and were already stretching out their little hands to her, wanting to take the girl to themselves. Someone got out a mana measuring ball. The magicians surrounded Leah, asked if she wanted to touch him, one offered her candy, another began to boast of his successes. Tellin shouted for them to stop, and like them, he leaned over to Leah and asked if she liked the dolls. He did something as an experiment and suggested she take a look. The lab was upstairs, so going up and down would take time. The girl asked in surprise why they didn't use teleportation. Tellin burst out laughing, calling the idea truly childish, and replied that magic was complicated. Even if you use magic that matches the mage's attribute, you still need to use mana efficiently and have high concentration. And also to understand formulas well, draw magic circles and remember spells. Leah started asking about the attribute and the magic circle. She didn't know that magicians needed something like that. She clearly remembered that when she was studying with the Master of Magic, she only learned how to effectively control mana and spells. This is exactly how the girl used it, without any circles, formulas, or attributes. Leah thought that magic was only about casting a spell, but that wasn't true. Tellin explained that you need to understand the theory, and only an archmage can simply cast spells. Such geniuses appeared once in a millennium, and Leah said out loud that it was a lie. She couldn't believe that all the magic she studied turned out to be wrong. On the way back, the Duchess and Leah were advised to be careful on the way back. The lady was glad that the treatment ended so quickly, and the girl was too. But in reality, the pain is not as bad as what is going on in her head. As far as she knew, the man called the Archmage was the only master of the Archduchy of Belus on this continent, the Archduke himself, but who then was the man who used magic without spells and magic circles? If Tellin wasn't lying, then Leah was a genius born once every 1,000 years to her. It sounded like a joke. Suddenly, she thought, she and the master had known each other for 8 years, but she never knew his real name. Her world was limited to the orphanage, the streets, and Delencium, but Delencium receives all the world's information, and Leah lived with the conviction that there was nothing she didn't know. But only after she died did she realize that it was all an illusion. All the elders gathered in the meeting hall. Elid said that it seemed like all the lazy people had gathered together after a long time. The boy said that they were now in a state of confusion, trying to understand what was happening, and the Duke agreed. Except for Chairman Valerie, since his son Sid was in jail and the council was called, he's probably seething with anger. Helid stopped near the portrait of his father, whose incompetence had kept the duchy under the control of the council for so long. To drive out the council of elders and his helpless father, and then inherit the title, the Duke went to war at the age of 18 and won a victory. After this, Helid received the nickname Cold-Blooded Demon of the Empire. With the support of the Ducal House of Belus and the Marquisate of Diapel, he was able to take the title from his predecessor, but the claws of the council dug deep into the duchy. Helid grinned. Now that he had the opportunity to rip out those claws, he couldn't wait to see how their faces would change. It was announced in the meeting room that the head of the family had arrived. Helid sat down and only then asked everyone to take their seats. Chairman Valerie immediately pounced on the Duke with the question of why his son had been imprisoned in the underground dungeon of the Knight's Castle. The Duke replied that this fact had not yet been officially announced, so how did the man know about it? The chairman bared his teeth and had nothing to say, and then Helid said that he was too interested in the internal affairs of the ducal house. The Duke ordered Taze to let in his deputy. Sid Valerie was brought into the hall to kneel before the elders. As soon as the boy saw his father, he turned completely pale. The chairman asked what this meant. He screamed at the top of his voice that it was simply unacceptable. How could they treat a noble knight like that? Hela started laughing. He asked Sid to answer him honestly, whether he had really fulfilled his oath and remained true to the honor of a knight, but the guy's face was blank. He remained silent. The elders began to whisper about why he couldn't answer, whether it was really true. Father Sid wanted to ask the vassals loyal to the house of the Duke of Hellas about the recent difficulties that Lady Diana had gone through. The chairman pointed his finger and shouted that this all happened because of the scoundrel Taze, who was responsible for her security. The knight countered by saying that the deputy had ordered them to remain in reserve that day, despite the fact that they were engaged in secret security. The deputy said that since his lordship had entrusted the guard to Sir Taze, they did not need to guard the lady until further orders came. Helad couldn't wipe the grin off his face as he listened to how, after his daughter's disappearance, the deputy ordered the knights not to say anything to him, so as not to anger him. After hearing the report of how everything had happened, the chairman walked quickly across the hall and immediately punched his son in the face. He yelled at him, calling him a psycho, accusing him of daring to play with the mistress's safety, and after that calling himself the son of the noble Valerie family. The deputy placed his hand on his chest and announced to his lordship that from now on, Sid was not his son. He asked him not to doubt the loyalty of their family. This scoundrel acted without authorization. Elad tapped his fingers on the chair railing. He asked the man directly whether the purchase of the night squad mine by Count Valerie's family was also just a prank by Sid. From that moment on, the Duke strips Count Valerie's family of their vassal titles, and the man, no longer denying his guilt, asks to be given a chance. The father and son were removed from the meeting. The Duke, as if nothing had happened, said that he would go to the capital next week, and before that he wanted to arrange a small banquet. Spring had finally arrived, and everything around was green. The trees began to decorate the castle with their thick attire, and Leah joyfully ran across the courtyard among all the beauty. The Duchess said that the weather was now perfect for a walk. Madame was very attentive and sensitive, and this time, as usual, she asked how Leah was feeling. The girl knew that they had gone out for a walk specifically to pay attention to her, but she didn't say anything about it. County Valerie received the punishment it deserved. Leah noticed more than once that the Duchess was a truly kind person. Like sunlight, she brought warmth to the heart, and what happened did not leave deep wounds. Suddenly, a shock of realization shot through me from head to toe. This was already becoming dangerous. Leah decided that she would live without attachment to anyone, but if this continues, she needs to be adamant in her decision. Madame, giggling, told her husband that she was going to leave this afternoon to pick out a dress for the reception, and Elad added that he had begun preparing for the banquet. But if they go to the capital, they will have less time to meet with the vassals of the lands, so there are many things to take care of. Leah listened to their conversation and tried to understand why the duchy was going to the capital. The Duchess turned to her and said that the girl had not been to the capital either. Leah answered meekly, anxiety growing in her soul, because if the Duchess went to the capital, she would die. After her marriage, she remained on the estate and raised her children, then moved to the capital and died less than a year later. The exact cause was not established, but since Leah had heard that the Duchess was bedridden, the girl assumed that Madame was ill. However, at their first meeting, the Duchess looked quite healthy. Is it possible that this is a psychological illness, as others suggested? Madame came from a fallen noble family, akin to a commoner, and faced fierce resistance from her vassals. The Duke of Hellas ignored their opinion, but when they moved to the capital, the relations between the nobles were probably difficult to call warm. If the reason was psychological pressure, then the idea of moving should be abandoned, but it is impossible to forbid the mistress of the ducal house from participating in social life. As Leah thought, Alan was hiding behind the tree then. She saw him at the end. It must have been a great shock for the boy to see the true nature of the teacher. The Duchess suddenly pulled the girl out of her thoughts. Taking her hands, she suggested that they arrange a girls' walk today. Leah couldn't help but agree, and very soon they gathered. Taze Sadian was waiting for them in front of the carriage. He introduced himself as their escort for today's walk. The knight gave his hand to Madame so that she could carefully climb the stairs, and the Duchess thanked him. Taze turned to Leah. He wanted to express his gratitude to her. Taze believed that he owed her a lot both at their first meeting and now. The knight said that if she needed help, she should definitely say so. Then Taze turned his head and asked Jack how long he would hide there. The boy came out from behind the bushes, embarrassed, dressed like a knight, which suited him very well, and greeted Leah. Taze hugged Jack and said that he was so talented that he decided to take him on as his apprentice, adding that in a few years Jack would be officially initiated. Leah walked up to the boy and took his hands, expressing her ardent congratulations. Jack was grateful to her because thanks to Leah he would be able to become a knight. When he said this, his ears turned very red, and the girl noticed it. She felt awkward because she knew Jack would have become one of the 3 knights of the Empire anyway, so Leah said he achieved this through his own efforts. She, putting her hands behind her back, congratulated him with a sincere smile. Jack was embarrassed and his face flushed. To hide this, he quickly walked forward, calling Leah to get into the carriage quickly. The seats inside the carriage were very soft, and there was no shaking at all. It felt even better than the carriage she had ridden in last time. The madam handed the girl a blue bag tied with lace. It contained round candies. The Duchess believed that one should eat something sweet before shopping. Leah chewed the candy. Its taste was so sweet and pleasant to the tongue that the girl blushed. Dana and her mother simultaneously called the girl a cutie. Leah laughed awkwardly and said that she thought they had arrived. There were more people outside the window. Many of them were walking with children or having some kind of lively conversation. Taze helped the Duchess out of the carriage, holding her hand. Dana told Leah to be careful. As expected, elegance was in the Duchess's daughter's blood. The step was a bit high, but it was possible to jump. Just as Leah was about to do this, the boy extended his hand to her. Jack said it was high up here. He saw her hesitate. Leah accepted his help and, like a duchess, descended from the carriage to the ground. Even after she left the carriage, she and Jack involuntarily held each other's hands. Leah called him a real knight, but Dana did not like such closeness, and she bit Jack's hand with her teeth. The Duchess took her daughter away from him in bewilderment. Dana broke free and screamed that Leah was hers. The girl asked Jack if it hurt a lot, but he said it wasn't much. It was the bite of a small child. Leah knew it wasn't going to stop that easily, and she started thinking about what to do until her gaze fell on the cotton candy. Having taken cotton candy each, the girls went into a clothing boutique with the Duchess. It was the first time Leah had been to a store with such luxurious things. The Duchess happily announced that it was time for some pleasant shopping. She wanted to choose some beautiful clothes. Leah waved to Dana and wished her good luck. However, at that time she did not yet suspect that Madame had taken the heroine with her for a reason. The Duchess asked what was wrong with Leah, and the girl, covering herself with her hands, replied that the staff had misunderstood something and were continuing to take her measurements. Then Madame said that everything Leah was wearing was her clothes. The heroine wanted to object, but it was too late, and besides, Dana herself approached. She was dressed in her noble blue dress with a white petticoat and 2 silver ponytails on the sides of her head. The girls hugged each other. Leah said that the baby looked like a fairy. Dana also thought her sister was very beautiful. Leah invited the girl to sit while her mother chose clothes. A girl's indignant cry suddenly rang out behind her. She crossed her arms over her chest and said that she had chosen this dress several months ago. The girls apologized to the young guest, but did not pay the deposit for her. Then she noticed movement behind her and, turning around, pointed her finger. The girl rudely asked Leah what she was staring at. Dana pressed herself against her sister, and Leah wanted to respond, but making a fuss in this place was a bad idea. The girl's mother approached her and told her to stop making noise, but Letitia did not calm down. The woman leaned over to her daughter and whispered that the Duchess was there, and that if she continued making noise, she would not be able to make a good impression at the banquet. The girl had to accept defeat and turn towards the exit in irritation. But she was so full of rage that she turned around one last time and flashed a malicious look. Leah turned pale from such impudence. A couple of days later, the day of the banquet arrived. The Duchess admired the girls. They both looked so beautiful in their new dresses. She literally squealed with joy because the girls looked so much like sisters. Leah was embarrassed that the madam was talking about her like that, but the woman reminded the girl that she was a dear and valuable child for their family. The Duchess stroked Leah's head, expressing the hope that she would no longer feel burdensome. Dana pulled her sister by the dress and asked her to come closer. The girl pinned a pink hair clip to Leah's hair, which went so well with the dress. The heroine doubted whether she could wear such expensive jewelry, but Madame said that Dana herself gave it to her, and when Leah went to the mirror, she was convinced how well this hairpin suited her long pink hair. The beautiful dress, the kind people in the duchy, it all seems like a dream that is about to end when Leah wakes up. The girl thanked the baby for such a gift and said that she would take care of it. Alan, also dressed in formal attire, entered the room to ask if they were ready. His gaze shuddered. He silently approached Leah and asked what she had on her head. The girl wanted to say that the lady gave her the hairpin, but she didn't have time. The boy quickly closed the distance between them. He swung his hand sharply, ripping the gift from Leah's hair. Alan, breaking into a shout, asked if the girl knew what it was. The Duchess reprimanded her son and told him to apologize to Leah immediately, but the boy was outraged. Madame explained that Dana had given the hairpin herself and that Leah was not to blame for anything. Then the rage inside Alan began to boil so much that he gnashed his teeth. The boy turned to Leah and shouted loudly that he hated her, that it was all her fault, and if only she hadn't come to their house, everything would have been different. Alan turned and hurried to the exit, not wanting to hear anything more from either the girl or his own mother. Leah looked down. She didn't know what to do. She told the Duchess that she was very sorry. The lady gently took the girl by the hand and apologized. She said that it was not her fault. Alan had recently given Dana this hairpin for her birthday, and he thought Leah had taken it. The Duchess spoke sincerely, saying that she should have been more attentive. She promised to punish her son, which made Leah feel even more awkward. She assured him that everything was fine. The woman said that she and Dana would enter the banquet hall later, so Leah could go in first and wait for them. The girl didn't mind, but her thoughts were now about the fact that Alan loved and cherished his sister very much. One could understand why he was upset. Carriage after carriage arrived for the celebration at the banquet. Ladies shone in their lush dresses and exquisite jewelry, engaged in small talk and drank champagne. The fan that was thrown closed in the air. The man asked Letitia what she was doing and asked her to behave more discreetly, but nothing stopped the girl because she was not wearing the dress she wanted. He repeated that she should stop talking about it and get herself together. Letitia had to make a good impression. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. After the exclusion of the Count Valeri family from the vassals, several vacancies arose in the ducal house. The Duke's beloved daughter, the same age as Letizia, her father reminded the girl that if she could cope, the family would survive. His wife added, by the way, that the incident was started by a single word from the young maid, whom the young lady treasured so much, but the man thought that this was a pretext. Everyone knew that the Duke disliked Count Valery, but rumors were circulating that the Duchess treasured this child. What kind of support could a commoner possibly have? Letitia thought about how this girl of her age was already famous in circles, the story of a commoner servant girl who was doted on by a little duchess. The girl grinned. None of it mattered, because this time she would definitely win the lady's heart. At the banquet, the arrival of Baron Jude was announced. He told his daughter that she had to give it her all, and Letitia demonstratively turned away. She already knew it. The girl opened her fan and began to look around the room in search of the young lady. Her gaze suddenly stopped on Leah. The girl was wearing her dress. Letitia walked up to her and poked her lightly with her fan. Leah shuddered and asked again if the girl was talking to her. Letitia put on a mask of smile, which hid a terrible hypocrisy, and asked what family Leah was from. Her gaze was self-confident, her movements were haughty. The girl called the heroine a lady. Leah froze. She did not immediately answer the question, being in a stupor, because that very child was standing in front of her. The girl she saw in the dressing room. Leah thought that if she called her lady, she had forgotten their first meeting and was addressing her formally. The heroine wanted to answer, but suddenly it was solemnly announced that the Duke and Duchess were entering the hall they entered with their children and looked like a happy family. Everyone began to bow to them and greet them with respect. Leah saw that Diana was not crying and was quite cheerful. The heroine bowed to the family along with the others, and Letitia remained behind her, glaring at Leah. She told the lady that the conversation was not over yet, and that looking around was a sign of bad manners. Leah said in surprise that the Duke and Duchess had entered. Letitia said that she was the one who first offered to talk to her, therefore the lady should respond. While she was insisting on talking, Dana ran up to Leah, hugging her little sister. The heroine awkwardly asked the lady what about other people, but Dana was looking only at Leah from there. Letizia was outraged that such an insignificant lady was communicating with Mrs. Diana in such a way. Dana turned to the girl and pointed her finger, asking why this idiot was tormenting her little sister like that. Letitia was shocked by this statement and wanted to explain herself. Leah knew things were going badly. The noise was getting louder, so she leaned over to the lady and happily declared that nothing had happened. Everything was fine. Dana was indignant. She noticed how this girl looked at Leah badly. Then the heroine decided to take the young lady away so as not to stir up a scandal. Letitia bit her lip angrily. She was damn irritated by this impudent woman, and she was not going to leave it like that. Soon the banquet guests moved into the courtyard, and the children were actively playing tag. Dana said, upset, that she had promised to protect Leah. She didn't like people who treated her sister badly, so Dana wanted to scold the girl because she was a knight. Leah took the little girl by the hand and softly said that the lady had already protected her. Dana had no idea how brave and cool she looked. Leah was about to bring snacks to the table and asked Dana to sit there. The young lady eagerly awaited her sister's return. She is small and charming, and it is unlikely that such a brave heroine could be found anywhere else. That's what Leah thought about her, because Dana even skipped a meal to see her, so she would definitely be hungry. The girl was about to quickly grab the treats and go back, and when she bent down, a shadow covered her face. Leah looked up and saw a chocolate fountain in front of her. There were many sweets and desserts on the table, as well as tartlets with caviar. While Leah admired this chocolate paradise and the grandeur of the banquet, the ladies looked at her sideways. Hiding behind a fan, they whispered with contemptuous grins that this was the same one that the lady had brought. Leah's hand trembled. She felt how at that moment all the attention was focused on her, and it was far from pleasant. The atmosphere around her became oppressive. The nobles openly whispered about her, judging her. A heavy lump rose in her throat, but Leah decided to ignore them, of course. The aristocrats would talk with disdain about someone who appeared suddenly one day. The most important thing for her now was Dana, but suddenly her gaze was drawn to a figure. It was Alan, who was supposed to walk with the Duchess and greet people. Leah thought it was strange. The girl thought that if they collided, they would definitely make a noise, so she needed to return to Dana, but it was not so. Small, elegant, gloved hands reached out furtively towards her. A sharp push in the back. Leah was thrown forward. The plate flew out of her hands. There was a loud crash as the girl fell face down on the ground. Dessert and champagne smeared across the grass. Leah sat up, her concern being about the dress that Madame had given her. The Duchess came running at the noise. She saw Leah and sat down next to her. She excitedly asked what was wrong, whether the girl was hurt anywhere. Leah did not dare raise her head. She apologized to the Duchess, saying that everything was fine. The heroine clenched her fists. Someone pushed her from behind, and the girl was sure that this was the child of an aristocrat, but if she focused on this, she would cause a commotion. Leah couldn't harm the duchy because of this. Someone said that even if a person of low birth wears expensive clothes, their manners will give themselves away. Alan quickly walked to the scene and pointed his finger at Letitia, saying that this girl pushed Leah. He saw it clearly. The girl asked what the Lord was talking about. She would never have pushed that maid. Alan shouted that he definitely saw it. Was she really going to make excuses? He pointed to the ladies standing behind her to confirm this, as everyone had seen the girl push Leah. Duke Hellas, who had come to the scene of the uproar, asked why they were not asking the victim anything. There would be no benefit even if third parties spoke frankly. He asked Leah to answer for herself whether someone pushed her or she fell on her own. After a slight hesitation, the girl said that she had not fallen on her own. Someone had definitely pushed her. Alan blurted out that he was saying he saw that girl push Leah, and Letitia continued to make excuses. The heroine told the Duke that she hadn't seen who had pushed her, and a smirk appeared on the hypocritical girl's face, since there were no other witnesses, although she didn't think that the Duke himself would intervene. Letitia decided to continue to pretend to be sorry, when suddenly Leah said that there was evidence here. At the moment of falling, she tried to grab the clothes of the person who pushed her. Leah had the edge of the garment in her hands, which was torn as a result of this, and the aristocrats suddenly froze, seeing that it was lace on Miss Letitia's dress. Alan smiled smugly, because this girl said that she didn't even go close to Leah, so how did she tear her dress then? Letitia began to tremble. Her words became slurred. She could not say a word, which gave her away completely. The Baron came running when he saw his daughter in the center of the conflict. He asked her what was going on here, what kind of disrespect she had shown to the Duke. Elid gave Jude a hard look and said coldly that it was because of his daughter that there was a ruckus at the banquet today. Therefore, he will have to suffer the appropriate punishment. The man turned pale. He asked what this meant. Alan offered his hand to Leah and told her to stand up. The girl placed her palm, wet from spilled champagne, into his hand. Alan, squeezing her hand tightly, told everyone present that this was their Diana's person. She was not the girl they could touch just like that. Letitia hysterically apologized and ran away, her parents calling out to her and Alan shouting at her to remember to pay for the damage to her dress. The Duchess leaned over to the girl with deep sympathy to ask again if she was okay, but Leah apologized. She wiped away the tears that had welled up, asking for forgiveness for having soiled her dress. She was very ashamed of it. The lady smiled softly and said that the girl didn't need to apologize at all. She gently ran her finger down Leah's cheek, saying that it wasn't her fault and that the clothes could be bought again. Dana ran as fast as she could to the heroine and hugged her tightly. She was indignant that a bad man was tormenting her sister, suggested going to buy new clothes. The Duchess supported her daughter. Leah stroked the baby's head, thanking her for her concern. She decided that she would not live this life suffering, so from now on Leah will not lose heart and endure insults, at least for the sake of these people who care about her. The day was drawing to a close, the banquet was over, and Leah emerged from the shower clean. Now she could breathe freely. Fortunately, the unfair outcome was resolved despite the event being interrupted, and even with the perfect piece of evidence, if it weren't for Alan and the Duke, no one would have believed her. The girl thought that when she went to the capital, she would need to earn some money. Leah opened the door and Alan was standing behind her. The girl awkwardly asked what the young master was doing there, but Alan didn't answer and asked Leah to follow him. The heroine turned pale, frozen at the door. This unexpected request made her tense. There was no reason for it. Alan brought Leah into the living room and told her to eat. The girl stood in front of the table with desserts with her mouth open, still not understanding. Then the boy told her to eat it all. Leah didn't know what he was planning, but she hadn't eaten since morning, so she was very hungry and didn't resist. She wished herself a bon appétit, and when the most delicate piece of cake ended up in her mouth, she was ready to cry from its wonderful taste. Suddenly, Alan apologized, and Leah slowly turned her head towards him in confusion. Then the boy apologized again, for being angry. Without looking at her, Alan said that he heard from his mother the events that Leah went through, how she protected Diana and what she did for her. Alan thought that Leah was kind to his sister because she had something in mind. But is it possible to take anything into account and calculate anything in such a difficult situation? So the ice in the boy's heart thawed. He admitted that he was guilty of behaving badly all this time and saying nasty things about her, but when he saw Leah, he immediately remembered Diana's disappearance, and that's why he was angry. The heroine said words of gratitude for him standing up for her then, and Alan, turning to the girl, said, "Of course," because Letitia acted disgustingly. He blurted out how he couldn't stand it when he saw such injustice, when suddenly he fell silent, as if he discovered that the distance between them had become very short. Leah smiled and said that he was still cool, so he shouldn't make such a face. It's a shame when a beautiful face frowns. Alan was taken aback, his face flushing scarlet. He indignantly asked how Leah could say such words and not be embarrassed, to which the girl replied that it was true. Then the boy said that it was true. He was handsome, and Leah smiled, repeating that he was handsome. Alan said she was ugly. Leah smiled. Even though the whole day had been crazy, this was a more normal end to the day than she expected, even if Alan was standing in front of her now and childishly calling her an idiot. After the complicated affairs ended, the year changed. Leah turned 9, and Jack and Alan were 11 years old, and everything returned to normal. Preparations for the trip to the capital went smoothly, and Leah and Diana joyfully celebrated the new year. The woman adjusted her glasses and asked if it was she, the girl who discovered the spleen. Leah felt strange about the situation, and the woman apologized for being late in greeting her. "She is Viscountess Bardot, the attending physician of the Duchy of Hellas." Leah was amazed. The Viscountess eliminated her siblings with her exceptional skills, the woman who became the head of the Bardot family, renowned for their medical skills. The Duke called Leah without any words, and she wondered what was going on, but she never thought she would meet a doctor. The woman showed Leah the plant and asked how she knew it was a splendens. The heroine replied that it looked like a common weed, but there was a difference in the leaves and stem. The hairs are like a thorn, and the veins on the leaves resemble a stretching web. This was the biggest difference from the weed, and when Leah named it, Bardot and the other specialists' eyes sparkled with joy. They didn't think they would see a splendor in their lives. They wanted to quickly begin research on growing it together with the magicians. The specialists began asking the child if she had seen any other medicinal herbs, and they suggested that it would be a good idea for Leah to study medicine. The Duke stepped in front of Leah and told them to stop. He calmed them down with just one look, telling them they could go back and begin their exploration. The heroine even sighed with relief. The Duke turned to Leah and said that he knew it. She truly was a treasure. His wife says that a treasure has appeared in their house. From what Leah had heard, the herb she had discovered was quite impressive if it could be cultivated. A medicine would be created that would be distributed throughout the empire. The girl was delighted, because then the duchy's reputation would soar even higher. Suddenly Helid said that he wanted to reward Leah. He asked what she wanted. The man smiled, seeing the confusion on the girl's face. She didn't think that he would say that it wasn't her fault. The Duke added that she would receive a portion of the profits, and if Leah wanted to learn something, his words were still relevant. The heroine had just what she needed. The very next day, Leah was delighted to see her official maid uniform in front of the mirror. She complained to the Duke that the butler would not give it to her, saying that there were no suitable clothes, so she was forced to wear such an expensive dress. Leah was shy but happy with the uniform she received. They even gave her a spare one, so she didn't have to worry anymore. The girl took a suitcase with packed things from the bed. It was time to go. The day of departure to the capital finally arrived. Alan, surprised, asked Jack, with whom he had become friends after several training sessions, if Leah was really quiet and obedient to begin with. Jack replied that he didn't really know, because he had only spoken to her a couple of times. Alan noted that Jack and Leah had spent several years together in the same shelter, but were not very close. For what reason, then, did she single out Jack and ask his father to accept him into the knightly order? Alan looked at the boy carefully. He was quite interested in this question. He said out loud that it was really because of his appearance, which Leah asked again right next to Alan's ear. The boy was so scared that he jumped up. The heroine apologized. She didn't think he would be so scared. The Duke and Duchess approached. Helid asked if they were ready to go to the capital, and Dana cried out that her brother should not yell at her sister. Leah followed the Duke, who said they were moving out right away, while Alan shouted at them to stop Dana, who was clinging to him with her teeth. On the way to the carriage, the girl turned in the other direction, and Elid asked where she was going. She went to get into the servant's carriage, but the Duke said that Leah was going with them. The heroine was surprised. The journey to the capital by servant's carriage takes 15 days, and due to the high cost, it was decided that only members of the ducal family would use the teleport. The Duchess supported her husband because Diana would cry without her. The young lady confirmed this. Leah apologized for the inconvenience, but the ducal family didn't see a problem with it, so they all ended up together in the same carriage. Elid said that when they reached the capital, he would create an account in Leah's name and assign a managing investor over time. A share for opening the splash would be credited to the account. Unlike the heroine's plan, her connection with the duchy continues to increase, but she is not under the family's control, so everything should be fine, when suddenly Alan calls her a fool. He said, propping up his chin, that a person's appearance is not everything. Alan turned away, adding that he was telling her personally, since she didn't seem to know it. When the duchy arrived at their capital mansion, the weather changed dramatically. The sky became covered with clouds and it started to rain. Upon arrival, the Duchess and the children first dried their hair with clean towels. The woman greeted the butler Albert joyfully and asked how they were getting on. While they were talking about the Duke having gone to the palace on urgent business, Leah noticed one woman. She stood silently behind Albert and did not take her eyes off the Duchess. Leah felt a strong hostility coming from her, but she thought she was imagining it. This woman, seeing Madame Diana, smiled warmly and introduced herself as the head of the maids. She noted that the girl looked very much like her mother. Diana got scared and screamed. She ran to Leah. The Duchess gasped in surprise. Because her daughter was not one to cry for no reason, she asked Alan to take her sister upstairs. Leah jumped up and wanted to go with them, but a light hand touched her shoulder. The Duchess stopped the girl and greeted Helen, who introduced her to Leah, the head maid. The heroine bowed, saying that she would take care of Madame Diana. The maids behind Helen's back were whispering about who this person was that was using the teleporter with their mistress. Leah froze. She heard them whispering about how the mistress hugged the maid. She remembered that first day at the guild when she followed the master. The comrades from Delencium were wary of her, whom the master had suddenly brought, and all the things that happened after were the same, difficult and unpleasant. Leah swallowed the lump in her throat, realizing that this time it would be the same, but she decided not to draw attention to herself, but instead to show intelligence in order to stay close to Diana. The Duchess sent a message before her arrival that Leah was loved by Diana, and that she should have the next room prepared, but Helen said this was impossible. The woman asked how a maid could stay in the main building, and even in the next room next to her mistress, they had prepared a room in the maid's dormitory. The Duchess objected that Diana would be constantly looking for Leah, to which the head maid replied that they would leave a chair in the hallway and allow her to serve her at night. The girl told the lady that everything was fine. She was even grateful that they would give her a living room. Leah smiled, realizing that the head maid had bad manners, so there was no point in continuing this conversation. Then the Duchess said that this time they would act according to the decision of the head maid. Helen grinned contentedly. A week has passed since they arrived in the capital. The Duke went to the imperial palace on military business, so it was difficult for them to see each other, while the Duchess was busy with social life due to invitations from noble ladies. Despite Leah's worries, the head maid provided financial and moral support to the Duchess. Of course, the grumbling about discipline and order continued, but unlike the pressing concerns, there were other things to worry about. Other maids approached the girl who was busy washing the windows. They heard that Madame Diana valued her very much. The brunette said that Leah eats with the mistress and is also going to share a room with her. She should know her limits. Her dog friends chimed in that she should be glad she could work at the Duke's mansion at all, and Leah thought how ashamed they were of their disregard for the 9-year-old. The girl replied that it was a great honor for her to work in this mansion. She smiled and promised that she would try hard. Leah saw no need to fall for the provocations of such guys. They pointed out to her that there was laundry piling up in the dorm and that she should deal with it, but Leah didn't even argue. She finished even faster than she thought, and it felt like a relief. When the knight walked through the courtyard, all the maids looked after him with admiration. A few minutes ago, Jack approached one of them with a question, and she was ready to answer anything. The knight asked her if she knew where a girl named Leah was. The maid asked why the knight was looking for her, and then Jack asked a counter-question, whether he was obliged to answer, which made the girl tense. This is how the knight learned that Leah was now in the washing place. He walked through the courtyard, mentally arguing that she should be next to the mistress now, so why was she doing menial work immediately upon arrival? Leah was diligently washing clothes in a wooden barrel, so she didn't notice anything around her. She sat up for a second to exhale. There were more things than Leah expected. Jack grabbed her wrist and pulled. When Leah turned around, he was kneeling in front of her, their eyes meeting. The girl was so surprised to see him here that she asked what he was doing there. Jack's cheeks flushed, but he was outraged that this question was all Leah could ask him. Several days have passed since he arrived in the capital. Did Leah really not hear anything about this? Even young Master Alan told him that he has not seen her at all lately. Leah replied that Alan had been busy lately, so it was difficult to see him. The heroine heard a whisper. Again, the maids were worried about what kind of relationship she had with this knight. They felt that Leah was pushing the limits too far, starting with Mrs. Diana. There was no better subject for gossip among the young maids, so Leah pulled her hand away from Jack and assured him that she was glad to meet him, but that she was busy at the moment. The boy's gaze fell on the folded things. He asked if she was really doing this alone. Hadn't Leah come to the capital to take care of Diana? The girl said that she had time left, so she was doing this. At the same moment, another maid informed her that Leah had planned to have tea with the mistress. The heroine didn't know what to do, because she still had laundry to do. Jack offered to help, but Leah refused, and then the maid approached her. The red-haired girl smiled at her and said that she would finish here, and that Leah could go. The heroine stood up and thanked the girl who mentioned that we need to help each other. Leah jumped up to rush to her mistress. She quickly said goodbye to Jack, but he asked her to wait. Pale fingers carefully grabbed the knight by the fabric of his shirt. The red-haired maid asked him to help her carry the washed clothes if he was not busy. She said that it would be difficult for her to lift them alone. Jack had a flashback to Leah sitting there alone, scrubbing out all that mess. He replied to this maid that Leah was younger and smaller than them, but she was able to cope with this alone. Jack turned around and added that she could handle it herself just fine. Leah noticed that her friend was already very popular. There was a significant age difference between him and the maids, and he was already receiving so much attention. However, this is not surprising, because later Jack will become popular not only among the maids, but also among noble ladies and misses. But despite this, there was not a single romantic rumor about him before he swore knightly allegiance to Diana. Leah was sure that if Jack had eyes, he would not be able to pay attention to other women. Leaving behind the beautiful Diana, the girl said out loud that he had a romantic side. Alan, who had been standing nearby all this time, asked in whom. Leah got scared, and then the boy leaned towards her, repeating his question, "Who is romantic?" The girl was surprised that the training ended so soon, and Alan said that he had left early to eat with Diana, not to see Leah. He seemed to be making excuses, but the heroine was preoccupied with the question of how Diana was doing with her lessons. The Duchess asked if homeschooling would be too difficult for young Diana, but the head maid replied that compared to other families, it was even late. Leah said that the mistress seemed to be doing well with her lessons. She did not hear Diana grumbling. Alan waved his hand, saying that they would talk about it later, since Leah had come for tea. The girl felt like Alan was avoiding the answer. When she looked into the living room, Dana immediately ran up to Leah with hugs. The heroine was delighted and asked how the lady was doing, and Diana shared that she had been learning letters and drawing. It was a relief to Leah to hear that the young lady was listening well in class. The Duchess waved her hand to the girl in a friendly manner. She had come here, finding time because Leah and Diana were having tea. And as soon as she said this, the head maid placed on the table the budget documents that needed to be approved during the day. The Duchess turned around and thanked Helen for her work, and the maid also reminded Madame that she needed to respond to the invitation to the banquet. The woman told the girls to sit down quickly. Helen had prepared tea for them. Leah noticed that the cups contained black tea, which Dana doesn't like. The little girl happily stretched out her arms and asked to give her cocoa. Helen calmed her with a look and asked if tomorrow at the studio Dana would also be drinking cocoa like a child. The Duchess was indignant and asked what the head maid was talking about, why they had suddenly decided on the studio without discussing it with her. However, Helen said last time that the lady should start leading a social life, but the Duchess believed that Dana was too young for this. She had no experience meeting people. The woman put her finger to her temple and said tensely that she knew that Madame had not grown up in the capital, but for an aristocrat like Diana, it was very important to make friends with her peers. The Duchess did not agree, but she could not answer anything because she had indeed lived in the mansion for a long time. Lady Diana is the daughter of a duchy, of which there are only 2 in the empire, and in the Duchy of Wayrant there is only 1 lord, so the lady must become the flower of high society. Helen finished off the argument with the argument that if this was not done, the young lady would become a laughingstock for the other aristocrats. Diana wanted to support her mother. She wanted to say that if she went with her sister, everything would be fine. However, the head maid sharply replied that Leah would not be able to go with her to the studio. Another maid will go with Diana instead. The girl greeted the lady. Her name was Sophie. She knew the names of all the noble ladies who would be present in the studio tomorrow, so she would help the lady until the very end. The Duchess said that Helen had crossed the line today. How could she arrange a meeting with Diana on a whim? Leah clenched her sweaty fingers, not understanding what kind of situation this was. She and Dana looked at each other, both stunned that they would not be going to the studio together. Helen believed that it was time for the lady to decide on a personal maid. The Duchess hadn't thought of appointing a girl named Leah to this position. The Duchess wanted to object, but the head maid interrupted her, saying that the mistress could not use just anyone as a servant. Helen had nothing against ordinary days, but not for the first visit to the studio. How could one trust such a young and inexperienced girl to the mistress? In theory, it's a meeting for friendship, but it's already full of ladies and lords who have created their own groups, a small format of high society where even the young can't relax. It is unknown what might happen there, so you need to choose your maid carefully. The Duchess said that Helen didn't know, but Leah was also a very smart and intelligent girl. The head maid thought that it was only because Leah was receiving the Duchess's favor, but she was still a child who was not yet 10. Helen was being rude to the Duchess of the Empire, but Leah knew that given what she was thinking about Dana's future, she was right. Not only that, as befits a servant of the Duchy of Hellas, she decided the internal affairs of the household. Helen also successfully helped the Duchess, for whom social life in the capital is new, so Madame hesitates. She is afraid of ruining her daughter's future with her incompetence. Leah apologized to the madam and the head maid for having crossed the line of decency. The girl decided to leave so that Sophie and the lady could prepare for the meeting in advance. At the end, she asked Dana to listen well in class. The little girl got up from the sofa and followed her sister. She was already reaching out to her and calling, but the doors closed. The next day, Diana was getting ready to leave for a social event. She was helped into the carriage. Leah smiled as she looked at Dana, who looked much cuter than usual. The heroine noticed that the lady was looking at her. Her lips instantly pursed and her cheeks flushed. Dana couldn't take it anymore and immediately and loudly burst into tears. Sophie asked the lady why she was crying so much. She needed to stop immediately, but Dana was stubborn, saying that if her sister didn't go, then neither would she. Then Leah approached the baby. She squatted down in front of her and said that if Dana went there would be a lot of goodies and she would meet a lot of friends. The young lady calmed down when Leah told her that upon her return, she would read a fairy tale and play with her dolls to her heart's content. Leah made a pinky promise to Dana and asked the little girl not to cry, but to go in a cheerful mood. The lady immediately gathered her courage and confidently answered yes. She waved her hand from the map window, shouting to her sister that she would be back soon. Leah told her to be more careful on the road, and Alan, crossing his arms over his chest, again called the girl a fool. The heroine asked why he called her, and Alan asked him to bring some snacks to the training ground a little later. As he turned around, the boy added that he would eat them during training with Jack, so let Leah get some snacks and come. Alan also noted that she should not send them through another maid, but come in person. He said it loud enough for the head maid to hear. It wasn't that she didn't like it, it was starting to irritate her so much that the hostility could be felt. After a hard workout, Jack wiped the sweat from his face with a towel. He looked away, noticing that he was being watched. Alan watched the young man closely, and Jack asked him directly if he wanted to say something. The gentleman sighed and said that she liked handsome men, and Leah told him several times that he was handsome. Jack froze. His excitement was betrayed by his blush and the slightly trembling voice in which he said that he didn't know she liked them like that. Leah also told him that he was handsome, and Alan's feeling of victory was replaced by a stinging feeling. The atmosphere between the two boys changed, as if there was electricity in the air. Jack said that Leah was staring at him somehow, and when he noticed, she replied that she was looking because of the beauty. The tension was broken by the girl's voice. Leah brought the boys some snacks in a basket. Jack, without taking his eyes off the girl, said that he would take it and extended his hand towards the basket. Leah let go of the wooden handle and a blue light flashed between her palms. She said it wasn't particularly hard, although in fact she was sweating profusely while refusing the maids who wanted to follow her, when she suddenly noticed Alan looking at her. And that expression was strange, but Leah smiled, saying that she had brought a snack, just like he wanted. Alan ignored this and asked point-blank if the two of them were in that very relationship. The heroine flushed and exclaimed, asking again. She considered this absurd in relation to Diana's man, but said nothing about it. Leah pointed her finger at Alan and answered loudly and clearly that she and Jack had been friends since the orphanage. But this would never happen. She especially emphasized the last word. The girl turned to Jack to hear words of support, but he froze with such a red face, as if he had been boiled in boiling water along with the crayfish. The smile on Leah's face froze at the sight of that expression. She was afraid that Jack's mood had worsened because he had been misunderstood. Leah asked if he was okay, since the young gentleman had gone overboard with his jokes. Alan snatched the basket from the boy, and, taking out a bottle of sweet water from there, he threw it to him. The young master told him to have a drink and then they would spar again. Jack, without taking his eyes off him, said that he would not give in. They stared at each other again. Alan told Leah that she could wait nearby and have a snack. The training lasted until sunset, so Jack even exhaled after it was over. Leah saw him go over to the barrels to put down his sword and asked if he was finished. She called the young gentleman so rude, he ran away, saying that he didn't know anything, but Jack couldn't do anything about it. Leah noticed that Alan always shifted the tedious work onto the boy. Suddenly she fell silent, seeing the wound on Jack's face. She leaned towards him, asking if he was hurt. Leah pulled her index finger towards his face to look slightly. He waved his hand sharply, removing her hand from his face. The girl didn't expect this. Jack called her by name and asked if it was possible that she liked young Master Alan. Leah's eyes widened at the sudden question. Then Jack continued that status sharing was a very strict thing. Leah interrupted him and asked if Jack was now asking if she liked Mr. Allen as a guy. Hearing yes, she replied menacingly that for her, the master was like a younger brother, and what could she do, because he was like a child who still slept hugging a doll. Jack clenched his fist and asked what about him. It turns out that he too is like a younger brother to her. But Leah replied that no. She smiled brightly and said that he was her friend. Jack smiled, relieved. Leah wondered if he was really worried that his girlfriend would hit a wall called social status and suffer mentally. That, on the contrary, was a problem that he would have to worry about. The two were interrupted by a maid calling out to Leah. She reported that the lady had returned. The girl was delighted, and the maid added that she would clean up the rest after her. Leah thanked the maid and ran to Dana, again hastily saying goodbye to Jack. She told him to be sure to go to the medical center. The heroine walked down the corridor, puzzled by questions about whether the lady had met many good friends. Leah opened the door slightly, warning Madame that she was entering. The Duchess sat on the edge of Dana's bed and used her index finger to indicate to the girl that she needed to be quieter. Apparently due to fatigue, the lady fell asleep immediately after she arrived. Leah was touched. She put her palms on her cheeks and wanted to call Dana an angel, but Alan did it almost at the same time as her. The heroine shuddered and looked at the boy, but he replied that he was only admiring his little sister. The Duchess said she had actually called Leah here to tell her this. It was a letter from Countess Mariette. The girl was amazed. She did not expect to receive anything like this, especially from the Countess herself. The Duchess apologized for reading the letter beforehand. She was listed as the recipient. It seemed the Countess thought Leah couldn't read. The girl unfolded the envelope to read the letter quickly. Leah read it with great trepidation, because she thought that Bianca had already forgotten about her. Bianca wrote in a letter that she was told that Leah was doing well in the Duchy of Hellas, and she was happy that the scar on the girl's body had completely disappeared. She was so busy last time that she couldn't properly explain how cool the Bellis Duchy was. For starters, the Duke was the most brilliant high mage alive. His son, a lord who studies at the academy, is a handsome man, and Bianca also mentioned the magnificent landscape located next to the sea above the fortress. While reading the letter, Leah noticed that Bianca Mariette had great devotion to the duchy and patriotism. She was touched, and the Countess's handwriting was beautiful. Leah decided to cast a preservation spell upon her return and leave the letter as a family heirloom. Alan suddenly asked when Leah had mastered writing. He had heard that they didn't teach it at the orphanage. Leah awkwardly replied that she had been taught by her sister, who used to come to the orphanage often, where the boys mostly played outside. The Duchess softly called the girl's name. She asked if Leah wanted to go to the Bellis Duchy. Madame called the place excellent, but there was a note of anxiety in her voice. Leah asked if Madame was there, and the Duchess said yes. Alan actively supported that he also went to the Bellis Duchy. He said that it was very cool, beautiful, and amazing there. The Duchess said that Alain had gone there when he was very little. He was only 2 years old, so enough of the idle talk. The lady apologized to the girl for wasting her time and allowed her to go, as it was already late. The Duchess remained in the room, worried about what answer this child would give. Leah, who was so delighted with Countess Marietta's letter that she walked back clutching the letter to her chest. A few days later, after reading Bianca's letter, Viscountess Bardot personally thanked Leah. Thanks to her, a large part of the urgent matter was resolved. She gave the girl what she asked for. The Viscountess said the girl could ask for something else, but that was enough for Leah, and so they said goodbye on a good note. Bardot said the girl could call her any time, and Leah turned around and wished the woman a good day. For several days after receiving the letter, the heroine helped Bardot, whom they met by chance. It was a simple task of classifying medicinal herbs, requiring only the ability to read, but the Viscountess, tired of the excessive work, expressed her deep gratitude. And Leah heard unexpected news. They were unable to grow a single splashia. Bardot said that what the girl discovered then was a barely growing root, which is already a miracle, but for research it is necessary to grow at least 1 splendens. The girl sighed. The rate of progress of the work seemed very slow. Even the duchy's physician and mages have only progressed so far, and if they are focusing on the effect of the medicine, then they apparently do not know how to use the herb itself. Leah hadn't had time to write a reply to Bianca yet, as she was busy. While the girl was thinking about this, walking through the courtyard of the duchy, Dana ran up to her from behind and hugged her sister tightly. Dana said that she missed him very much, and naturally at that moment the maid's glances fell on both girls. The little girl wanted to give her sister a gift. She handed Leah a drawing. Leah was so delighted that she covered her mouth with her hands, and the maids turned in her direction with interest. The heroine asked if the lady had really drawn a princess from a fairy tale. Leah said it looked very similar, but the maids couldn't understand it. They didn't see anything like that in the young lady's drawing. The heroine thanked him for such a gift, to which Dana replied that her sister was a princess. Sophie gasped, calling the lady generous. The maid said that during the trip, Dana kept praising Leah's beauty. All the daughters of aristocrats were curious about who Leah was. The heroine blushed. She didn't know what to answer to this. The girl didn't hear about this, since Dana only smiled when Leah asked her about her impressions of the trip. It turns out that she talked about her there too. Sophie grinned and added that, however, the lady had said that her sister was beautiful no matter how you looked at her, and if you said that, anyone would be in anticipation. She crossed her arms over her chest and continued that she was afraid that if other ladies and misses visited the duchy, they would be astonished. Sophie added that, of course, only slightly. Leah's face flushed. The other maids began to giggle, supporting Sophie, and all that pressure from the ridicule fell upon the heroine again. Leah liked what Diana said at the shelter about how beautiful she was, because those were her sincere feelings. The girl had never been vain, had never looked down on others because of their appearance, but why should she have to endure such an insult? Dana looked at her sister with her big, bright eyes and asked her sister what was the matter. Sophie said that nothing of the sort. Leah was just impressed by the lady's noble and wise character. The maids giggled even more when Sophie said that children her age usually like beautiful and attractive things, but they considered inner beauty more important. So Sophie, as her subordinate, feels proud of Dana, or so she said, until he intervened. Alan shouted why Diana was standing and listening to her as if dumbfounded. He walked up to the girls and stopped next to the maid, glaring at her. Alan said that Sophie is now making fun of Dana. She thinks Leah is ugly, but says she is beautiful, and the young lady immediately becomes indignant. Tears welled up in Dana's eyes. She pointed her finger at the maid and asked what this ugly woman even knew. Sister Leah was the most beautiful in the whole world. Sophie shook her head and held her palms out, insisting that wasn't what she meant. Alan stepped forward and poked her in the shoulder. He asked with a menacing expression how she dared to mock the lady, being a servant of the duchy and so openly. The maid stopped giggling and tensed up. They didn't expect the young master to side with Leah. Sophie continued to say that everything was wrong, but Alan shouted that he did not want to listen to any excuses and called the butler. The butler listened attentively, and Alan clearly and distinctly told him not to let this maid catch his eye again. Sophie fell to her knees in fear before the master and began to ask for forgiveness, to accept her guilt and to give her a chance. Turning around, Alan replied that there was no forgiveness, that she should leave the mansion immediately, and if Sophie caught his eye tomorrow, then everyone who was here would be held responsible. He put his arm around Leah's shoulders and told the girls to go. At that time, the heroine did not know what impression she made on the servants, receiving the protection of the young master. The next day, when Jack left the nightly order dormitory, Leah called him. He looked in her direction and seemed surprised. The young man approached Leah and immediately asked what was the matter. He really didn't believe it when they told him that she had come to him, because it was the first time. He was curious about the reason she came, and the girl took out some kind of bag. She handed him a small jar, marking it as a gift. It was an ointment with an excellent effect. A small abrasion would heal in a day, and it even works for a serious injury. This product was created by Viscountess Bardot. Leah helped the woman a lot and got this ointment. The girl also remembered that Bardot was going to create a medicine for restoring energy and developing the body next time. Jack called the girl by name. He asked if she still found him so weak. Leah didn't understand what he was talking about, so Jack looked away and said that he would use the ointment, thanking her. The heroine waved her hand, saying that she knew better than anyone that he had excellent skills. Jack said he would walk Leah, but she didn't see the need. There was a silence, which the boy broke by asking Leah if she was going to endure being humiliated like a fool again. This rude question hurt Leah. She said that it seemed like he was treating her like a fool. Jack's wrists tensed. He asked another question. Was Leah really doing well lately? The girl still didn't understand. Then he said directly that it was about the maids. Leah replied that she was fine, but the guy was worried that she was being harassed, for example, by having all the work dumped on her or being called in separately and scolded. The heroine smiled sincerely and repeated that she really was okay because it was he who saved her from those bastards. Jack asked, "Is it true?" It was time for the girl to go. She wished her friend good luck in training. She walked along the veranda with a red face from the realization that Jack was so worried about her. Even though that incident happened, Sophie was kicked out and it all ended. Leah was indeed burdened by the servants' gazes, but if she acted carefully, everything would be as it should be. When a person decides to be careful, life throws more challenges at him to test his resilience, and so Leah didn't even notice how she stumbled into a bucket. She tripped over him and was pulled to the floor. The bucket of water spilled, but the girl managed to lean on the wall to keep from falling. Leah looked at the puddle of water, wondering why the bucket had been left there so dangerously. She suddenly heard someone's quiet laughter, and when she looked back, she saw a piece of a maid's uniform hiding behind the wall. They left the bucket here on purpose to harm her. Leah thought she should tell the Duchess about it. And only now did she realize what she had just thought about. Because this was her problem, she couldn't burden the busy Duchess with such a worry. Leah decided that she had begun to delude herself about being a real family because of a few acts of kindness, which is why addiction is dangerous. She knew she didn't have to pretend, because Leah was used to this kind of bullying, and if she endured it a few times, it would pass. It would be good if things were resolved according to this idea, but after that day, more open mockery began to be directed at Leah, for example, putting branches in the laundry, or the whispers nearby that she heard. In a past life, the girl experienced such bullying and was already fed up with it, so everything is quite bearable. Until the moment when water from a bucket used to wash the floors was poured on her from the balcony. This was too much. The smell of water permeated all of Leah's clothes and hair, and she began to feel sick. Diana's classes were about to end, and Leah couldn't come looking like that, so she decided to get rid of the bad smell first. She took a shower but discovered that the spare maid's uniform was also in the wash. All she had left was the dress she had worn in the Duchy's fortress. If Leah goes out in a dress like that, everyone will start whispering again, but she couldn't go out naked. She changed her clothes and looked at herself in the mirror with the thought that she was not committing any sin by wearing this dress. Leah put on an apron and hoped she wouldn't stand out too much. She hurried, trying not to catch the servant's eye. However, she still caught someone's eye. The red-haired boy noticed her and stopped. He pointed to Leah and asked Lucio if the girl was his little sister. Hearing Lucio's name, the heroine stopped. The young man replied that no. Leah slowly looked around to make sure she hadn't misheard. Lucio was indeed standing behind her, and he was saying that she was not his little sister. He looked straight at her and added that his little sister had the same silver hair as him. The boy thoughtfully agreed with him. He looked again and now clearly saw that they were not alike. Leah was speechless. She didn't think that they would meet so suddenly. One day Emily asked her if she had heard about that scary man. She was referring to the terrible Duke of Hellas. They said his son attended the local academy. The boys guessed that this was the crybaby's older brother, and it was good for Jack. He had shown himself well in front of him, so now he was walking around well-fed. Emily tried to remember the Duke's name, and she remembered. Lucio Helad. Leah had been thinking about this name for a long time, and unconsciously repeated it out loud and drew it with a stick in the sand. She thought it was simple, but it turned out to be quite difficult, although if the girl had gone to school, she would have easily written something similar. Suddenly a man's voice was heard behind her, asking who she was. Leah turned around and blushed. Lucio himself stood in front of her. The boy said that she kept saying his name. Leah wondered why she remembered this particular moment from her past life. The red-haired man asked Lucio if this girl was deaf by any chance, and Leah replied that no, she was just too surprised, so she was rude. She introduced herself as a maid working in the duchy. Then the guy's gaze fell on her outfit. He already began to ask about it. Leah froze. She was so confused that she didn't even think about how it looked in the eyes of the young men. The girl didn't have time to answer before a hand in white clothing covered her. Lucio stood before Leah, asking His Highness not to treat the man from his house as if he were interrogating her. They had a bit of a verbal altercation, and then they heard running down the hallway. Alan and Dana were delighted to see their older brother. The young gentleman asked why Lucio had arrived so late, since he and Diana had arrived in the capital a long time ago. Dana rushed to hug Leah, asking why she was there, and Alan was just looking for her. He was surprised that she was wearing different clothes for the first time in a long time. His Highness now realized that Leah was a servant, entertaining the lady, and seemed to be treasured. Lucio answered his younger brother's questions, saying that it was exam time, so he couldn't do anything, and that he was going to stop here. Alan was surprised that Askal didn't come with the guys. He wanted to show him Diana. His Highness remarked to his younger brother Lucio that if he showed Askal Dana, he would begin to hate him. Lucio made a remark to His Highness, and the boy understood everything. He asked to introduce him to his people, otherwise he would be isolated. Helad called Diana and Alan. He introduced them to His Highness the First Prince, Nicholas Ragstein. Leah was even more amazed. He is the only prince of the imperial family, the same age as Lucio and 12 years older than Diana. But despite this, he is a vile thief who had his sights set on Diana, and Leah was completely inflamed with anger when he said that Lucio's sister was very nice. Dana got scared and went up to Leah. Lucio told His Highness that he could go, and Nicholas asked if they wouldn't even offer him tea. Leah smiled at the little girl, but deep down she thought that Nicholas deserved it. Dana shouldn't have to deal with that bastard for a second. The lady pointed to her little brother Lucio and asked Leah if he was really very handsome. The girl replied that the young gentleman looked like Dana, so he was very handsome. This question put everyone in an awkward position. Hugging Leah, Dana turned to Lucio. She asked him if his sister was also beautiful. Helad crossed his arms over his chest and replied that no, she was not beautiful. Nicholas laughed so hard that tears came to his eyes. He clapped Lucio on the shoulder and said that he knew the guy was honest, but hadn't he gone too far? She was a young girl after all. Alan noticed Leah's gloomy expression and asked cautiously if she was okay. Then the girl suddenly said that she was fine, because next to her there was a young gentleman who always called her a fool. Leah took her mistress by the hand and invited her to play with dolls while there was time before dinner. Dana was delighted and followed her sister. Leah bowed to the young men and announced that she and the young lady would go. When they left, Nicholas noticed that this girl was really cheeky. He thought she would be depressed. His Highness asked Lucio why he did this if he didn't want to talk nonsense. He could have answered as usual. Dana played with a figurine of a knight who came to protect the princess. The princess in her arms suggested they slay the dragon together, but Leah was in no mood for games. She looked at her sad reflection in the mirror and asked herself who she was. "Who is she that lives in the mirror that Leah looks at?" The heroine turned to Dana. She said that she shouldn't say in front of other people that she is beautiful. Dana was worried that her sister was angry because her brother said bad words, but that wasn't the issue. Leah put her finger to her lips, suggesting they keep it their shared secret. Dana didn't understand why. Leah said that other people don't know that she's beautiful, and the heroine decided to lie to her mistress a little, even though she was ashamed of it. Dana decided that the secret should be kept, Pinky swearing if no one knew about her beauty. The lady assured that she would keep the secret. She was a brave heroine, so she would protect the princess. The maid looked into her mistress's room to say that everything was ready for dinner. Leah told Dana that it was time to go eat. As soon as the girl entered the refectory, she ran into her father's arms. Leah stood near the table. She didn't expect that everyone was gathered there, including Lucio and the Duchess. The Duke of Hellas turned to his eldest son. He asked him to move to the next seat and told Leah to sit on his chair. Hearing this, Leah turned pale, and Lucio looked at his father in surprise. The Duke explained that Diana would eat on his lap, and Leah would be next to her. The heroine was worried, because the other servants were watching at normal times they would have immediately been against it. But now it was quiet, although in the duchy, the Duke's word is law. The girl was worried, because the family was eating, having gathered together for the first time in a long time, when suddenly she saw that Lucio stood up. He moved to the next chair and, placing his hand on his own, invited Leah to sit down. The girl, embarrassed, thanked the young gentleman and sat down next to him. The Duchess smiled and suggested that they start eating quickly, otherwise the food would be tasteless if it got cold. It had been a really long time since they had sat at the same table together. Madame said that Lucio would soon have to return to the academy again, so it was worth getting some proper rest. Dana speared a piece of meat with her fork and offered it to Leah. The heroine bent over with a fork to try the dish, but someone got ahead of the young lady. It was only after Leah had taken a piece of meat that she heard Dana's indignation, that she had been the one who wanted to give Leah something to eat, but her father had done it first. Helid said that his daughter had short arms, so she would not win against him, and the Duchess told Leah to eat more, since she was smaller in build than her peers. The girl felt awkward because there were many maids around and they saw her in this position, but there was something that could not go unnoticed. Leah was wondering why it was so quiet today. It turned out that all this time they had been looking at Lucio with admiration. Her gaze was drawn to his face, but she liked Dana the most. Leah, after a long time, could be glad that she received fewer glances thanks to Lucio. But how wrong she was. Rumors spread throughout the palace like wildfire, with the maids discussing how Leah had sat next to the young master and how the Duke had personally fed her. Rumors spread that the girl had secretly stolen her mistress's clothes. The maids didn't know what had happened in the duchy's domain, but they were sure that Leah was deceiving everyone because she was cruel and smart. The maids wondered what they could do in such a situation, since not only the mistress, but also the young master with Alan were on her side. However, this doubt was dispelled, because Mr. Lucio arrived, who would never show leniency to her mistakes. The next day, Duke Hellas called Lucio into his office to talk. The man noted that his son had probably heard that there was a lot of work going on in the estate, and Leah had helped them a lot. Lucio guessed that in the end, the father wanted to support this girl. The Duke was sorry to leave her only as a servant, for she was smart and talented and would succeed in everything that Lucio taught her. It was strange to the young master that his father, who did not allow strangers to get close to him, was wasting his attention on Leah, but Lucio did not even understand himself. The moment he met her, he felt something inexplicable. Pain as if his heart had been cut out, and hostility rising from the depths of his soul. And also melancholy. Lucio was pulled out of his thoughts by his father's voice, saying that she had refused his help. The young man asked again, and Helid said that Leah preferred the work of a servant, so he asked his son to convince her otherwise. The boy was interested in something, namely, if she received sponsorship, then she would leave this house. The man shook his head and added that she was still young, and Diana needed Leah, so that wouldn't happen. Lucio smiled and said that he understood. Leah was delighted when she was given the job of cleaning the library in the main building, rather than in a separate building. The girl leaned towards her and asked with displeasure if there were any objections, but Leah was only too happy to go there. After all, she would be alone in the library of the main building, full of rare books, which was in no way inferior to the library of the imperial palace and which could only be used by the ducal family. It was a rare chance to look at expensive books, so Leah immediately went there. The maid smirked when the girl left. They thought she was a fool, because the young master stayed longer in the main library than in other places. And Lucio hates it most of all when people disturb him. Theory of understanding magic, history of the empire, or in-depth healing herbs. Leah was looking forward to which book she should start with. She decided to look at the location of the mine on the map and also find out about the Bellis Duchy. The girl approached the large doors leading to the world of important and even secret knowledge. This was the most anticipated moment for her after arriving in the capital. The library was quite dark as the windows were covered with curtains, which was surprising as the place was not in use now. She opened the curtains and the sun's rays illuminated the room, perfect for cleaning. Leah was about to wipe the dust when she suddenly heard movement behind her. This place was not empty. Lucio was here all this time. Moreover, he was resting on the sofa. His eyes were closed. His breathing was even. He was sleeping. Leah froze when she saw him. She didn't expect to see anyone here, especially a young gentleman. Her heart almost sank into her boots, and she wondered why the guy was hiding his presence in his own house. Leah stared at Lucio, her cheeks flushing with sudden thoughts. The young master she had seen until now had always been like a perfect work of art. It was the first time she had seen him so relaxed, but it was most likely because he was at home, so the girl decided to tidy up and leave so as not to disturb him. Leah walked over to the book that was lying on the floor near the sofa. She was curious what book he was reading that made him fall asleep. The title was much stranger than she expected, Ways to Make Friends with Shy Animals. Because of the sun's rays illuminating the young man's face, he turned his head slightly. Leah, holding the book he was reading, looked at him. She reached out and touched his forehead, wondering why he was sleeping so uncomfortably in the library. The girl hadn't noticed before, but when she looked at him again, she noticed that he looked like Diana, especially their hair was similar. Lucio woke up from the gentle touch, but he was in no hurry to open his eyes. Leah didn't have time to pull her hand back when the young gentleman was already looking at her. He asked sleepily what she was doing there, and the girl pulled back, awkwardly apologizing. She quickly got up from the floor and in her haste stepped on the hem of her own uniform. Lucio stood up and shouted at her to wait. The sheets of paper with the theory scattered into the air. The girl fell to the floor and grabbed the back of her head. It was quite painful. Suddenly she realized that this was not the time for this and began to quickly collect the scattered papers and ask for forgiveness, trying to explain. When she told him she had been ordered to leave, he asked who had given the order, and only now did it dawn on Leah that the maids knew Lucio was here, so they had sent her specifically. The girl put the documents in a pile and handed them to the young gentleman. She put them in order, but advised him to take a look anyway. Lucio looked over the theory carefully. Everything was divided into topics, as it should be. He noticed that she could read and knew many difficult words, and he became interested in how much she understood from this. Leah took a step back, first saying a little, then correcting herself by saying she didn't know. Lucio said that she seemed to be running away. He asked from whom. Leah froze in place, her face reflecting fear. Lucio noticed this and said that she was feeling afraid again, but apparently nothing could be done about it. The maids stood at the door at this time, putting their ears to it to hear what was happening and to make sure that the master was scolding Leah. Suddenly they heard the master calling them. The girl opened the door with a smug grin, convinced that they had achieved their goal, and asked the young gentleman what was the matter. She saw Leah's confusion and Lucio, who was saying something to her. It looked as if the lord was scolding the servant. The maid was sure that Lucio had called her because of the serious punishment for this girl. She asked what the young master wanted, and then the young man pointed to Leah, calling her a child. Lucio ordered warm tea and a light snack to be made for her, which almost made the heroine's jaw drop. Very soon, warm tea and desserts were served, and Leah sat at the table with frozen cutlery in her hands, unable to recover from the shock. At that moment, both girls were surprised that Lucio did not scold Leah. The maid bowed and walked away. The girl hesitantly asked the young gentleman why there was suddenly food. He replied that Leah had found the book on his list, so it was a reward. Lucio looked away, saying that food is the best reward, so they say. The girl asked again. He told her to stop asking questions and start eating. Then the heroine quickly began her meal. There was a slight creak of a chair. Lucio sat down opposite Leah and asked her to come to the library every day from now on. It would seem that nothing else could surprise her in this situation, but suddenly this sounded, and a piece of cake had already fallen off the girl's fork. Leah wasn't really against it, but she had disturbed his sleep and had been caught while secretly looking at him, so why was he really going to torture her personally? The heroine, still stumbling with excitement, said that she had been assigned to the remaining territory, so she could not say for sure. The doors swung open and Alan called out loudly to Leah, with Jack and the head maid with him. The boy, not hiding his amazement, asked what she was doing here. The girl got up from the sofa and said that she came to clean up. Alan walked towards her, saying that this place was like his older brother's personal office, so why was she here? Leah replied that the other maids had assigned her here and said that it was usually empty, but Alan couldn't believe it, since Lucio often spent time in the library. Helen bowed to the young master with apologies. She said that the maid under her command seemed to have made a mistake, but Lucio was not interested in whether it was a mistake or not. He crossed his arms over his chest and said that this should never happen again, and that he would provide library services to this child. The woman's face twisted in bewilderment, especially when Lucio said that Leia would also come here tomorrow. The young master made the girl turn pale as he said that she would come here immediately without doing anything else, and that it would be like this forever, even when he returned to the academy. The young man's bright blue eyes seemed to sparkle as he looked at Leah, wanting to make sure she understood him, and the heroine expressed her agreement with a trembling voice. Helen tensed up and asked if she could find out the reason why the young gentleman entrusted the maintenance of the library to this child. Lucio's eyebrows furrowed, his gaze became cold, and the young man asked Helen if he had to explain every little thing. The woman shuddered, and, as if realizing her situation, apologized to the young gentleman. The head maid left the library, and Lucio turned to Alan to find out what business his brother had with him. The boy said that he wanted to ask Lucio to watch him and Jack train, but on the way he saw the head maid and wondered what was going on. Alan saw the table set with desserts and asked his brother what he was going to make Leah do since he ordered her to come here every day. Lucio replied as if nothing had happened, that food was a reward. He was more curious about who was behind Alan, and his brother introduced the young master to Jack, a new knight training in the Lexian order. The young man bowed to the young master. Alan said that he and Leah had been in the same orphanage, and for some reason this made Lucio thoughtful. The young gentleman decided that he would look at the boys before going about his business, so they could go to the training ground. Alan asked Jack to go first, and he would take a couple of books. The boy turned to Leah. He sighed and said that his brother didn't allow just anyone into this library, and if she woke her brother up from his nap, she would be kicked out of the mansion. Leah looked down and held her breath, and Alan knew she did. But he decided not to develop this topic, and asked her why she thought his older brother had treated her so condescendingly. Leah herself did not know the reason for such mercy towards the maid, the first impression of whom was not the best. Just as the thought had matured in her head and was already spinning on the tip of her tongue, Alan suddenly said that it was because of Diana. It is thanks to her that Lucio treats the girl well. Alan said that his brother was soft towards his sister, and after she heard Lucio call Leah ugly, there was a cold war between them for the whole day. The boy suddenly fell silent. Leah's emotions were so overwhelming that tears were welling up in her eyes, and her face was red, because for her sake Diana had even argued with her older brother. Leah now knew what it really was like and was very touched by it. The mistress's time for classes was about to end, and Leah was about to go. Alan asked her to wait. He asked if the other maids were tormenting her. The girl stopped. She did not expect such a question. Even the boy found it strange that the maids had assigned Leah here. Most avoided this place, so there was no other explanation than bullying. The heroine, blushing, shouted that nothing of the sort happened. From now on, it will be located mainly in the library, so everything will be fine. Leah asked Alan not to do anything. She was in a hurry, so she left, leaving the conversation unfinished. The boy shouted after her that she could call him any time if she needed help. The girl ran down the corridor in worry because Alan also noticed that something was wrong. At first, Lucio realized that the maids were tormenting her. She is the maid that his younger sister cherishes, so he took her side. And now Alan, whom Leah considered immature, noticed this. She was ashamed. The girl felt sick and pressed her palm against the wall, although she understood that it was not her fault. The heroine read a fairy tale in which, at the end, the princess and the brave man lived happily ever after. But Diana did not know the ending. She was asleep. Leah smiled, looking at the baby. Dana begged her to read a book, but ended up falling asleep. The heroine thought that if she had time, she would solve the problem with the servants, but in the end, she found herself in debt to Lucio. Dana opened her eyes half asleep and noticed her sister's drooping face. It turns out that she listened to the story to the end, for she said that she also wanted to live happily ever after with her sister. The girl was surprised and asked again. Diana's eyes closed and she quietly repeated that she wanted to be with her sister. Leah froze. At first she followed the Duke of Hellas with a light heart. Diana followed her, but Leah thought it was the instinct of a small child who has nothing to rely on. Therefore, the heroine's decision to leave the duchy someday never changed. But every time she saw the child who loved her so much, Leah's confidence was shaken. Dana fell asleep, and the girl quietly left her room, closing the door behind her. She walked down the corridor, now wondering if things had ended well between Jack and the young master. At the mansion, she met the returning Duchess, accompanied by her head maid. The girl said that Diana was already asleep. She read her a story, and Madame thanked Leah. The Duchess told Helen that Diana would soon receive an invitation to a tea party hosted by the princess, so the teacher should be asked to focus on the rules of behavior in the imperial family. Looking coldly at Leah, the maid apologized and said that she would go first. The heroine shuddered from this look. She did not understand why Helen was looking at her like that again. The Duchess heard that Leah would be working in the library of the main building from tomorrow, and the girl confirmed this. She clenched her fingers nervously. Helen had probably told Madame about this. Perhaps the Duchess would also find out that the other maids were tormenting her. But the woman gently placed her hand on the girl's shoulder and remarked that it had turned out well. She said that Lucio was different from other children in that he had a slightly difficult character, but it would be good if Leah helped him for a while. Her son doesn't let anyone get close to him. Probably he liked Leah, which the girl began to deny, saying that it was thanks to Mrs. Diana. However, the Duchess understood her son. Lucio was a child who did everything himself without anyone's help. Madame was proud of her son, but she was also worried. The Duchess told him to prioritize rest over studies, which caused the elders, who learned of this fact, to immediately come running and declare that she would spoil the heir to the duchy. So they had to send Lucio to the capital, and he ended up growing up to be a wonderful boy, but the Duchess still regretted that choice. She was worried that her son was not comfortable with her. Unlike Alan and Dana, Lucio seemed to feel better with Helen. Suddenly the Duchess laughed, adding that she was talking nonsense. Leah walked through the courtyard of the mansion, thinking about the words spoken by Madame. The Duchess could not be harsh with Helen because of Lucio, because in childhood the head servant replaced her and looked after him. However, his behavior towards her was not so affectionate. On the contrary, very cold. Leah paused, wondering if there was anything she didn't know. She glanced to the side, her eyes widening and frozen. Under the veil of moonlight, Lucio stood alone in the courtyard, lost in thought. He held a scabbard in his hand, inside which lay a sword. Leah wanted to ask him about many things, about how to help the Duchess, what kind of relationship he had with the head servant. Lucio noticed the movement and turned towards it. But the courtyard was empty. Only the warm light of the lanterns and the leaves torn by the wind rhythmically colored the silence. The young man said out loud, "Did he imagine it?" A lot has happened in the library in just a few days. First, the maids who tormented Leah were replaced. The maids' dissatisfaction remained the same, but they could no longer torment her as before. Because thanks to Lucio's order, the heroine was able to stay in the library all the time. Of course, Leah was very busy because so many people came here. But during Lucio's absence, she could read books with peace of mind. He didn't really torment her, but Leah has to monitor his mood. The girl said out loud that she was uncomfortable. The young gentleman came up to the sofa from behind and, leaning on it, asked what she was talking about. Leah jumped back to the other end of the sofa. She asked Lucia in fear when he arrived. The boy did not understand why she was so surprised. He asked her to bring tea and milk. Leah noticed that the gentleman brought goodies again, and she was grateful to him for this, but because of this, she gained weight. Her gaze stopped on the young man's hands. He was holding a bag containing the very same buns that were sold at the kiosk in front of the academy. Lucio took 3 large golden-brown croissants out of the bag. He handed one to the girl for her to eat. Leah blushed. Lucio was nowhere to be seen in the morning. Did he really go to the academy to buy them? But why would he do something so annoying? She took a bite of the bun. It was incredibly wonderful. Leah learned for the first time what they tasted like. Lucio said she wanted to eat. That's why she looked at it like that, right? It was true. Leah remembered the time when she had closely watched the students of the academy. Then Lucio also asked her if she didn't want to eat. He knelt down in front of her and handed her a chocolate candy, calling it a mood-lifting medicine. The young man held it in front of the girl, asking her to try it. Leah was wary, but she was curious. It was the first time she had seen something magical. The candy fell neatly into her palm. Leah put it in her mouth, wondering if the young master would lie to her. But the taste of this chocolate melting in her mouth was so amazing that the girl held her breath, her eyes sparkling with pleasure. Lucio asked her how she was, if her mood had improved. He asked to say his name again. like last time. Leah didn't understand at first, and then froze with her mouth open in front of the young master. She remembered trying to write his name with a stick. He was talking about this exact moment when Leah was practicing writing. The girl bowed sharply and asked for forgiveness, which surprised Hellas. She promised that she would no longer unceremoniously mention the Lord's name. Lucio didn't answer then, but his deep gaze, full of empathy and compassion, spoke volumes, though Leah didn't see it. After that incident, the young master sometimes came to the girl and gave her the magic medicine. Only later did Leah learn that it was not a magical medicine, but chocolate, and a little later she left the group of beggars and was unable to hear the reason why Lucio was kind to her. And even after that, the heroine never tasted anything sweeter than this chocolate. That is, she thought that she would not be able to taste it. But again I ate the same sweet chocolate as that day, but this time in the Duchy's fortress. Leah suddenly realized that the Duchess had not yet visited the library. Although she was busy, her expression when she spoke about Lucio looked slightly sullen. Does she really think her son feels uncomfortable around her? Leah apologized and asked the master why he called the headmaid by name. A second later, the girl realized that she had asked an inappropriate question without thinking. However, Lucio replied that he didn't know. It had simply become a habit. He had lived in the capital since childhood, but at that time she was not the main servant. Later the young man was going to change his attitude towards her, but she herself wanted him to call her by her name. That's why he doesn't have any ulterior motive. Suddenly Lucio asked, "So what?" It didn't seem like this question had spoiled his mood, so Leah dared to ask another one, whether he was comfortable with the lady. The young master chuckled, paraphrasing what she was asking now, whether he was closer to the headmaid than to his mother. Lucio said that she couldn't have come up with such nonsense on her own. Could it really be that her mother said so? Leah didn't respond to this. She only asked him to be a little kinder to the lady if he wasn't closer to Helen. It's a bold request, but if it can at least ease the burden on the Duchess's soul, then perhaps a future tragedy can be prevented. To Leah's surprise, he said he would try. She was amazed that he was not pushing her into a corner. Was Lucio really such a kind person to begin with? The guy leaned on his arm, under which the sofa sagged slightly. Lucio said that he answered honestly, so now it was Leah's turn. Approaching the girl, he asked why she was afraid of him. Looking at him at the first meeting, Leah trembled, and after that too, if she saw him, she became nervous and froze in place. Lucio asked if it was because of his words, since he had said that she was ugly. He wanted to know if it hurt her feelings, and Leah began to pull away and wave her hands, assuring him that it didn't hurt at all, although it wasn't pleasant. Lucio's lips parted, and the next question came out with his breath. He looked Leah straight in the eyes and asked if she wanted to look beautiful in front of him. There seemed to be particles of electricity in the air, but the girl said no. She never thought about wanting to look beautiful in his eyes. It was enough for her to be beautiful in the eyes of the young lady. Leah turned away and proudly declared that she was special, so Lucio should not be upset, because many people wanted to look beautiful in front of him. The door to the library swung open and Dana joyfully called out to her sister. Leah immediately rose from the sofa upon seeing her young mistress. Lucio watched as the two girls hugged each other tightly, saying how much they missed each other. Leah asked if the lady had come here alone, and Dana replied that she had. The heroine asked Diana to call her next time, or ask the maids in the corridor to accompany her. Even though Dana knew the way, Leah was worried, and the little girl clung to her sister, promising that from now on she would walk with her. Leah turned to the young master and asked if she could go. It was time to play with the mistress. Lucio let her go, and the girls headed together towards the exit into the corridor. The guy stared after Leah. Her words about how she never thought she wanted to look beautiful in his eyes kept playing in her head. And her embarrassed expression, and the warmth with which she said that it was enough for her to be beautiful in the eyes of the young lady. Also, many people want to look beautiful in front of him. Lucio repeated his question once again. Does she want to be beautiful? And, having tasted it, he asked himself how he could say such a thing with his mouth. He mocked himself. The words Leah had spoken to him so boldly. No, not even that time she had woken him up in the library. If it had been another maid, he would not have turned a blind eye to it, and now Lucio smirked, asking himself why he was not angry with her. Leah and Dana walked joyfully across the yard, holding each other's hands in anticipation of a new meeting. The little girl asked to read a book again, but fell asleep in the process. The heroine hugged Dana and wished her sweet dreams until they met at dinner. Here it is, that very moment when Diana fell asleep, and the work in the library was finished. Leah had been waiting for this moment. She would finally be able to write a reply to Bianca. She just had a beautiful letter cover that she had received from the Duchess. Leah was walking down the corridor, humming a tune to bring it to her quickly. It turned out that it had been pouring rain outside the whole time, and the girl was just entering the maid's dormitory. When she went up to the second floor, she found that a lot of people had gathered there. Leah suddenly realized that they were standing outside her room. She rushed to the door, shouting what they were doing here. The maid said with a slight grin that Leah had arrived on time. They told her about rumors that she was allegedly cleaning out her mistress's things, so the maids rummaged through her room. The girl took out a white dress with pink inserts from Leah's closet and said, "Look what we found on you." The heroine tried to snatch the dress, saying that the mistress had given it to her, but the maid sharply pulled the clothes away from the girl, telling her not to make them laugh. Even if the mistress values her, would she buy such an expensive dress for a simple servant? There is a limit to lying. The atmosphere around began to get tense. Leah put the dress along with Bianca's letter in a drawer and kept it carefully, but how did they find it? One of the maids said loudly that the others should see how impudent she was and where she got such bad habits from. The girls separated, and Leah saw an envelope thrown on the floor and the Countess's letter, crumpled into a piece of paper. The maid asked if Leah really thought that if her mistress valued her, she would turn a blind eye to such things. The girl suddenly bent down to the floor to take the letter, thereby frightening the maid, who recoiled with a scream. Leah's hands trembled at the sight of such an important letter for her. Crumpled on the floor, the maid saw her reaction and sarcastically asked if the maid really thought this was a joke. Then and now, all that came back to the heroine was mockery and neglect. Why is it like this? Why is Leah a despised orphan who will have nowhere to go if she leaves this place? The girl continued to press, saying that this was nonsense, that someone like Leah was behaving arrogantly and didn't know her place. Emotions overwhelmed the girl. They rose from her chest to her throat like a whirlwind, a hard lump that was impossible to suppress. Leah bit her lip hard. She froze, thinking at that moment that it was her fault. She was ordinary, beautiful, and unsuccessful. Worse than others because she is too ordinary, so they all don't understand how such a person can be anything. A simple, gentle person who can be simply trampled and abandoned at any moment. Without turning around, Leah replied loudly that until now she had been lenient with them all. The maid was indignant and shouted that the girl was completely out of her mind, but Leah interrupted her. She stood up from the floor, continuing that she had been constantly enduring it and trying to quietly overcome it. Leah turned sharply, and flames burst into flames in the air, pouring out in a stream onto the girls. The girl, engulfed in a powerful, growing fire, loudly asked why they kept making fun of her. The girls quickly ran to the door, shouting about the fire. The temperature in the room instantly increased, and tongues of flame grew in the room with wooden furniture. The maid tripped and fell, looking at Leah in fear. She gasped loudly and called her the spawn of the devil. The girl's gaze dimmed. Leah thought that she could leave the Duchy of Hellas at any moment, but she didn't do it. Is it because of independent money and splash research? But these are all excuses. The reason Leah decided to stay here, enduring the abuse, was because she wanted to stay close to Diana. The heroine wanted to spend time with her and save a person who was valuable to this child, the Duchess, for this sole reason. The flames grew at a furious rate. The rest of the maids ran out into the courtyard, and only Leah remained with this bully, who now backed away in fear. Leah moved her hand lightly, controlling the flame. She asked, "If she is the devil, then who is this girl? The heroine did not stay in this place to be mocked by people like this servant." The girl said that she could leave at any time, and then her voice broke into a scream, hiding her throat. She could go anywhere. The flame flared up with new power around her. The Duchess's loud voice called the girl. The lady, standing in the doorway in just a nightgown and with her hair down, asked Leah to look at her. The heroine was speechless. She saw that Lucio and the Lord were also there, looking at her with frightened looks, full of worries. With each new breath, Leah felt hotter. Her breath caught in her throat. The thought that they were angry because she started a fire in the house caused an acute shortage of air. The girl covered her face with her hands. Her heart began to beat so wildly that her chest was constricted, and the girl clutched her white apron with her fingers. The Duchess extended her hand and gently called Leah to her so that the girl would take her hand, because where she stood was dangerous. Leah's head was spinning and heat was spreading through her body. She took a shaky step forward, quietly saying that she was okay. She swayed back, and the girl leaned her hand on the wooden windowsill, assuring that everything was fine. She turned to the window, realizing that there was nothing she could do now, and that if she sacrificed herself, everything would return to normal. The Duchess shouted for Leah to stop. It was too late. The heroine let go of control over her body, and her back bent backwards. The lady ran through the fire to grab the girl, but the little body had already gone outside the window. Lucio stood there in a stupor, his eyes wide with shock, unable to take a step. Leah had seen this look in Lucio's eyes before, when she was being kicked in the street, accused of stealing a pen, even though she had only wanted to pick it up from the ground. The girl's face was purple with bruises, her face, clothes, and hands were covered in dirt, and then she saw him in the crowd. Lucio froze in the crowd, looking at Leah. His surprised look, but inaction as a thought, was reflected in the girl's mind. She felt regret and pain from the realization. He despises her. Leah pressed her toes into the ground and stood up. The girl turned around and ran as fast as she could, and the owner of the pen shouted after her for her to stay put. At least Lucio Leah didn't want to show herself like that. But why? Why does no one believe her words? The girl stumbled and fell, tears falling onto her clenched hand. Pain and resentment were breaking through to the surface. Why was Lucio looking at her with such eyes? Then a confident and calm voice told her that the girl was apparently having a hard time. A man with long black hair and piercing red eyes stood before her. There was no contempt or condemnation in them. He extended his hand to Leah and invited her to come with him. As she fell, the heroine looked straight at Lucio, thinking that she had wanted to ask him a lot of things at their first meeting. Did he recognize her? Did he really remember her? And this look of the young man brought back the memory of the last day when she was dying in his arms. And he called her so desperately. And even now he jumped up from his seat screaming her name. Leah closed her tear-filled eyes, wondering how he knew her name when she hadn't told him. The woman clutched her head, her voice trembling. The rain outside the window beat on the roof, and lightning flashed along with the furious thunder, causing every living thing on earth to tremble. The woman's voice broke. Her husband ran into the room. He approached her and asked her to look into his eyes. The woman grabbed his hand, screaming that their baby was crying. The child was crying that he was in pain, but she couldn't do anything, and what should she do? She was in despair. Tears streamed down her face. It seemed to her that her child was looking for her. She should be nearby. The fair-haired husband clenched his teeth. He himself was almost crying and asking for forgiveness for not being able to protect the child. It was painful for him. He hugged his beloved woman tightly, trying to comfort her. He wanted to take away all her pain and despair, but he couldn't. He felt sincerely sorry. His Highness coldly called the butler and ordered him to bring Commander Mariette. Tellin rushed into the mansion as soon as he could and stood over Leah's bed for a long time, trying to help her. The girl had a fever, her whole body was shaking. The Duke, all disheveled, asked how Leah was. The magician answered honestly that tonight would be a critical moment. Elid shouted that Tellin had said that everything was already over, and now the critical moment had come, and then the guy replied that Leah had survived a mana explosion. Often the body cannot cope and explodes, causing instant death. But her body is intact, so it can be said that it is a miracle, perhaps because she desperately tried to save everyone. If she had stayed in the mansion and given her body to the explosion, then everyone who was there would have been caught in the explosion. Most likely Leah would have jumped out instinctively. The Duke realized that at that moment Leah was in the most pain, and even so she did not think about herself. Dana was crying loudly. Her whole face was red from tears. She stood behind the door and called her sister. She wanted to come in too. She was worried and asked her mother if she was in pain now, but the Duchess answered the girl that Leah needed rest now. Madame took the baby in her arms and asked Lucio to let her know if Leah got better. Dana resisted, saying that she didn't want to leave, by which time Jack had rushed in. Seeing the Lord in the corridor, he, all out of breath, asked where Leah was now. Lucio replied that she was currently being treated inside. Jack asked if she was okay, if he could see her, but the young gentleman did not answer. He turned around. He sharply nudged the butler and ordered him to go immediately and call the headmaid. Lucio looked ahead, filled with anger, and his blue eyes, like the sea, became icy. He muttered through his teeth that he would definitely hold her responsible for this incident. Several days passed after the incident, and the Duke and Duchess spent almost all their time at Leah's bedside. Finally, the girl woke up. Helad and the Duchess jumped up from their chairs. Madame exclaimed, asking Leah if she had come to her senses. The girl quietly answered that yes, but Leah did not understand why she was in the Duchess's chambers. She slowly rose up, then the woman told her not to move, because her body had not yet fully recovered. Tellin was shocked and excited when he saw that the child had regained consciousness. The Duchess ordered the magician to examine the girl immediately. The guy opened the suitcase with healing stones and directed his palm at Leah's face. A blue seal appeared in front of her. He cast a restoration spell first, but the girl had not yet fully recovered, and her neck was especially badly damaged, so she needed to be careful. Talon gave Leah the medicine. The Duchess told the girl that she had experienced a mana surge and asked if Leah remembered it. The image of the terrified Duchess and the Duke at the door and the blazing fire still stood before her eyes. The girl looked away, and Madame asked what was the matter. Was she really uncomfortable again? But the heroine said that she was grateful to them for curing her and not driving her away. The Duke smiled bitterly and said that it was beyond comprehension. He addressed the magicians with the words that they could go. The guys bowed to his lordship. Leah closed her eyes, feeling that she was about to be scolded. Elid called her by name, and the girl ran through the most terrible scenarios in her head, for example, that she would now be kicked out of the duchy. But the man asked if they were really adults for her, whom she couldn't rely on. The girl's mouth opened in surprise, and Elid continued, asking why she hadn't told him from the very beginning. Unlike the servants in the fortress, the servants in the capital do not know how Leah came to the duchy, and Helid prevented talk about this for Diana's sake. However, he would have taken measures in advance if he had known that this would happen. The man was outraged and exclaimed that if Leah had said even a word. Suddenly he fell silent. Tears began to flow from Leah's eyes, and she began to apologize to the Duke. The madam could not stand it any longer and rushed towards the girl, embracing her tightly. She said that there was no need to apologize. They should have understood this without her words. The Duchess sincerely apologized for the fact that the girl had to cope with this alone. Leah, hugging the Duchess, quietly asked, so they weren't driving her away? The Duchess pulled back and confidently replied that, of course not. What was the girl talking about? Leah's shoulders were shaking. She admitted that she was very scared, because everyone hated her. The heroine felt that she was only causing inconvenience to the duchy. She couldn't control her emotions and tears streamed down her face. Leah sobbed loudly. The Duchess smiled and wiped away Leah's tears. She told the girl to scream only in such a way that she asked for help and said that she was scared. She suddenly looked at her husband and sternly asked why he was driving the child into a dead end. The man obediently lowered his head and apologized. He was just worried. Helid said that from now on, Leah could do whatever she wanted, and she didn't have to work. Initially, she was allowed to be a servant only because she wanted to. He never thought about forcing her to work, and from now on the girl would use the room next to Diana, but Leah was worried that the headmaid would be against it. It turns out that Helen received a temporary suspension from work this time, so Leah shouldn't pay attention. The girl was shocked by this, especially when Helid told her that it was Lucio who had done the work. He had interrogated every servant who had tortured her, punished all those involved, and then driven them away. The Duchess exclaimed that there was no need to tell the child all this. Leah wondered why this was so, since the headmaid was one of the pillars on which the Duke's mansion stood, so the girl believed that it would be difficult to punish her. There was the sound of fast running in the corridor. Diana and Alan ran into the room with tears in the corners of their eyes. They wanted to see Leah as soon as possible. The little girl ran up to her sister and asked how she was and if her body hurt. Leah smiled and replied that everything was fine now. Now, instead of unnecessary worries, the heroine decided to be glad that she did not break up with Diana. Lucio retired to the library. He drew the curtains and slept on the sofa. The room was dark and quiet. The young man was breathing heavily and squeezing his red eyelids. Even in a seemingly calm state, he thought that he had punished the maids properly, but his anger did not pass. Maybe he should have made them kneel before Leah. Suddenly, Lucio found himself in a quiet, green place near the academy, where a little girl was sitting in the courtyard and drawing on the ground with a stick. He asked who she was. Leah turned back. Lucio came here because she kept calling his name. He still remembered. That moment when I met a little child. The girl's hair was disheveled, her face was covered in dirt, her eyes were large and full of surprise. Lucio thought then that she looked like a newborn baby. He still remembered his first meeting with Leah, her appearance, which seemed more fragile than anything that existed in the world. It kept bothering him, so he kept hanging around. He didn't want her to get scared, so he gave her food or medicine, but nothing changed. One day he was walking down the street, lost in his thoughts about why she was looking at him with that frightened look. Then he witnessed this scene with the pen, and how the girl was running away and the student was angrily shouting after her. Leah ran past Lucio and he looked back. The guy hissed, indignant at how this beggar dared to touch his thing. Lucio grabbed his wrist. He pulled it hard, asking what the guy did to that girl. Receiving no answer, only a painful cry, Lucio abruptly let go of the young man and he fell to the ground. Lucio told him to get out of his sight right now, and he would slowly think about his punishment. The student apologized loudly and quickly moved away. The girls were surprised to see Mr. Lucio like this. It was not like him, and naturally, the question arose, what kind of relationship does he have with that girl? One of them said, guessing that this could not be. The young man turned sharply in the opposite direction, unconsciously causing the girl to recoil. Lucio ran, barely able to catch his breath. One day he casually asked Leah if she had a wish. She smiled and replied that it was nothing special, but it would be nice if someone asked if she was okay when she was sick. He remembered this and wanted to fulfill this wish. Leah also knows that the world is full of terrible things. He wanted to go with her. Lucio reached out his hand to her, knowing that with him there would be no danger. Suddenly, the emotions became so strong that the guy woke up. He placed the back of his hand on his forehead and tried to catch his breath, and he had that dream again. A dream that mixed everything up in his head, and after waking up, he couldn't remember anything. Lucio chuckled, realizing that a nightmare would have been better. A bright, spacious room with delicate tones was already waiting for the heroine. Taze carried the girl in his arms. He helped her sit down on the bed, wanting the girl to get more comfortable. Diana smiled happily. She asked how her sister's room was, and Leah said that the bed was very soft. Alan handed the girl a box with a bow, asking her to accept this gift. The heroine became embarrassed and quietly thanked the boy. Inside the box was a dress and a letter with a red wax seal. The girl was amazed. Her breath caught, but Alan told her to express gratitude not to him, but to her mother. She personally tidied up the wrinkled dress and prepared the letter. Leah did not take her eyes off the gift. She sincerely thanked him for it and asked how she could repay him for such kindness. Alan told her to get better faster, and Diana said that now they were closer and could play more. Lucio entered Leah's room and said that her body had not yet fully recovered, so was it okay for her to laugh and chat like this? The girl greeted the young gentleman and asked in amazement what his business was. Lucio brought her the book she was reading. He thought that she would be bored, because Leah would only lie in bed. The girl accepted the book from the young gentleman's hands and thanked him for bringing it here. Lucio suddenly grabbed Leah's hand and said that he had barely fed her enough. The heroine raised a questioning gaze, her face flushing. The young gentleman explained that it seemed like she was about to break into pieces, and Jack and Taze, who were watching this scene, froze. Leah was speechless. This young man seemed to know no shame, and she mumbled something about her hand so that he would let go. Lucio let the girl go and handed her the key. It was the key to the library of the main building. Leah looked at the key in surprise and asked in confusion why he was giving it to her. Lucio was leaving for the academy soon, so he wanted Leah to keep it safe while he was gone. The boy added that if she wanted, she could go there any time. Seeing her bewilderment, he wanted to say that if she didn't need him, but Leah sharply turned her head and blurted out that she thanked him for his concern. The girl was happy, looking at the golden key in her palm, because now she would be able to read books more often. Lucio smiled. A few days later, Leah woke up in her new room after a good, full night's sleep. She saw through the window that the weather was nice today and wondered if she could go outside. After everyone visited her, because of the Duchess, who does not allow Leah to leave the room, let alone get out of bed, the girl led the life of a cat for several days. She was comfortable, no one else hurt, but her body ached from inactivity, and she wondered what excuse she could come up with to get out of bed. The girl looked at the nightstand and remembered the letter. She had finished writing a reply to Bianca last night, and she needed to ask the Duchess to send it today. In the corridor, the girl bumped into a maid who gasped when she saw Leah. She was holding a broom in her hand and asked if Leah was okay and could go out already, to which the girl replied that the doctor had given her permission. The maid smiled. She called it a relief. The girl told Leah to tread carefully. The heroine smiled back and thanked her. The heroine walked slowly, wondering what had changed during this time, because the maids she met along the way and other people had changed in their behavior. They only began to treat her a little kinder, but this already made the girl's soul feel lighter. Leah stopped when she saw that the door to the living room was open. She had already reached out her hand to open the door, but suddenly froze, hearing the Duke's voice, who was about to say something important. From behind the half-open door, one could see that all the members of the duchy had gathered inside, and the Duke indicated that this matter concerned their family. Madame said that everyone knows that Leah is a good and kind girl. Alan, crossing his arms over his chest, did not deny it, although she seemed like a fool, but Madame immediately reprimanded him. The woman continued that, because of the recent incident, they had long thought about the fact that Leah had suffered emotional trauma due to being a commoner and an orphan, and that was why she had been bullied. She clenched her fist, saying that this was a very unfair incident, so they made sure that it would not happen again, but there was no guarantee that Leah would not encounter this outside. Alan exclaimed, "Were her parents really throwing her out?" He jumped up from the sofa and began to fiercely defend her, saying that she wouldn't last a day outside, and besides, he and Diana treated her well, so why would she want to leave? However, the Duchess and the Duke had no such desire, but Leah may want to leave because they do not know what she is thinking about. It was just a guess, so the Duchess asked the children if they would accept Leah as a member of their family. Lucio's gaze turned to his mother in surprise. The young master wondered what this might mean, and Helid confirmed his suspicions. He wanted to officially adopt Leah. Then the girl will receive the surname Helid and become a member of the ducal family. It will be great if no one will despise her, and she will be able to live with her head held high. Dana asked what it meant to be adopted, and the Duchess gently explained that Leah would become her real sister. The little girl replied in surprise that she was still her sister, to which the madam smiled. She stroked the girl's head, noticing that her Diana truly adored Leah. Hellas valued the opinions of his sons. If they agree, Leah will become their little sister. But Lucio said he was against it. The Duchess asked worriedly what the reason was. For Lucio, Diana is the only younger sister, and that is enough for him. Upon hearing this, the heroine dropped the envelope from her hands. Her face turned red and she covered her mouth with her hand to keep from making a sound. Leah dug her fingers into her cape, thinking that she should be grateful if they wanted to adopt her. But why then did she begin to despise them? Lucio's disagreement crashed into her head and echoed. Tears streamed down her chin. The girl asked herself if she had the right to think about this, and yet all this time she had received such enormous support from the duchy. Although she had already experienced something similar once, she expected that perhaps this time it would be different. Leah turned around. She didn't want to inconvenience them with her feelings, so from now on she was going to really get ready to stand alone. A few days later, the Duchess held the letter in her hands and asked if she should send it. She noticed that it took Leah longer. Was it really difficult for her to write? The girl, dressed in a maid's uniform, replied that the letter did not have any special content. She wrote about what she had learned about the Bellis Duchy. The Duchess smiled when Leah called the place beautiful and attractive. Suddenly, Alan looked into the office and announced that the carriage had arrived. The Duchess invited the children to go out to meet her. Time passed quickly, and the day came when Lucio had to return to the academy. The Duchess asked her son to be careful, but the young man said that they would see each other again during the festival. Leah remembered how happy Alan had been that they had all decided to go see him together. While the girl was thinking that there were a lot of people at the academy during the festival, a high shadow blocked her from the sun. Lucio walked up to Leah and told her to think of this as her home. Leah looked up in surprise and asked again. A smile appeared on Lucio's lips. He touched her hair and tucked a strand behind her ear, saying that he really loved having her living here. The young master asked her to continue living here from now on. Then he turned around as it was time to leave. Dana shouted after her brother not to cry because she would come to him soon, and Alan asked him to write more often. Leah's cheeks flushed, and a quiet question escaped her lips why he said he didn't want to become a family, that Dana was enough for him as a younger sister. But at the same time, he hopes that Leah will stay here. The girl watched the departing carriage, holding the strand of hair that Lucio had touched with her fingers. She could not understand his feelings.